At a time when our world faces an unprecedented energy crisis, the need for transformative solutions has never been more urgent. Unity. Welcome to the second annual Tribeca Future Face Heart of Singapore. Over the next 3 days, we're not just discussing the challenges, we're diving deep into solutions, beginning with the tools that will pave the way to a carbon-neutral future. This is the leaders of today shape the energy landscape of tomorrow, a gathering of minds who inspire. Together, we will discover unparalleled investment opportunities, learn from the pioneer transition, and connect with like-minded professionals committed to making a difference. The future is not just, it's what we create. Welcome to the second annual Tribeca Future Facing Commodities Conference. And welcome to breakfast for day 3. Lovely to see you all up so bright and early. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Now, this morning on the program, we're beginning with an opportunity to hear from some speakers who come from a little bit left of field, I suppose, but what they have to say and share with us certainly will have an impact on the resources industry and also the way ESG and innovation takes part in that as well. I'd like to point you all, please, to a video that we've put together highlighting the giant that is the West Australian mining industry.
Welcome to a place of unparalleled mineral and resource potential. Home to the world's largest fleet of automated mining trucks and world's first automated heavy-haul long-distance rail system. Where access to world-class industrial ecosystems, value-adding opportunities in downstream processing and advanced manufacturing. Where you will find the next generation of information and operational technology, from traditional solutions and 3D mine design, and access to a hub of information on mining and petroleum resources, including mineral exploration, geological maps, spatial databases. Where project facilitation and support to investors from the WA government. With a skilled workforce and leading use to drive innovation and provide world-class products, services and technology. A place where environmental accountability, social responsibility, commercial success are inherently inseparable concepts. Place at the forefront of sustainable mining. We welcome you to Western Australia.
It certainly is. I'd like to invite upstage His Excellency, the High Commissioner for Australia here in Singapore, Allaster Cox. Would you like to come and join us there up on stage? Please make him very welcome, everyone.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and to our special guest speaker this morning, Mr. Steve Okun, and to all of the event sponsors and organisers, to Stuart McDonald, to the Tribeca representatives here today who've been main sponsor for this conference, It's a very great pleasure for me to have been invited to this opening, well, not that this is the opening anymore, but the opening of the third day, I think, of this conference on future-facing minerals and the potential for investment in Australia. And obviously, we've seen the enormous potential in the mining sector of Western Australia, and we've got representatives from the Western Australian Government here, office in Singapore as well. So welcome to all of you, those of you who are from Australia, and I understand there are a large number of you, including from Perth. So welcome to Singapore. I'm sure you're not strangers to Singapore, but welcome back. And to all of those of you who are resident here or Singaporeans, thank you very much for coming. I think this conference will be underlining the really significant depth and potential that Australia has in new minerals, the minerals of the future. I think Australia has long been understood as a very important country for the provision of minerals during the age of fossil fuels, and we still are, obviously, a very important source of LNG, of iron ore, and of many other minerals that will continue to, and fuels that will be significant for the future of the global economy. But given the size and diversity of our geology, we're also a very important province of the future for the new minerals that will be critical to our future in a decarbonised world. And that includes, obviously, the well-known lithium, which will be, or already is, an important part of the production of, batteries. And we're already exploring partnerships both in Australia and beyond, including with our neighbours such as Indonesia and other countries, in the potential for the development of the battery industry. But many other minerals besides that will be, and I won't go into the long list of them, but there are many minerals which will be absolutely critical to the development of modern industries, modern tech industries, the minerals that will sustain and build the enormous tech revolution that we are all experiencing every day and every week of our lives today, and will be critical to the transition of the global economy to a decarbonised future. So mining, just because we're moving to decarbonisation doesn't mean that mining is at an end. In fact, mining is just going through a new transition to a new future. And Australia will be very much a core country globally in that transition. So I hope this conference is giving you some insights, allowing you to begin your work to undertake due diligence on opportunities for investment. There are many companies in Australia who are not necessarily household names, not the BHPs of the world necessarily, but smaller, small cap companies, explorers, entrepreneurial fossicers for new mineral opportunities. And I think it is very important for investors to undertake due diligence to understand what those potentials might be. Some of them involve risk, but they equally involve enormous potential opportunity. So I do hope that this conference helps you better to understand the opportunities, and those of you who are from Australia seeking investment partners, I hope that you're here and can find some partners who might be interested in investing in Australia. We want to encourage more and more investment from Southeast Asia, particularly from this significant global hub of Singapore into our market. And I do hope that this conference, the discussions, the people you meet, the keynotes, all give you an important sense of what the potential might be and the connections that help you make careful judgments about what kind of investments you can make and allow you to meet some of the people who can perhaps provide you with the capital to make the next step of your journey in developing these exciting new mineral opportunities. So thank you very much for the invitation today, and I look forward to listening to Steve, who's going to talk a lot about the big geostrategic challenge at the end of the year, the US election. Obviously, things like the IRA and so forth, very critical in terms of what happens in the global market and decarbonisation. So I think it's going to be a very interesting scene-setting discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, I have the great fortune in my job to travel around and host many conferences not dissimilar to this. And back in 2016, I was hosting an international conference in Perth, Western Australia, and it was an international parking conference. And we had a number of speakers who came from America. And during the course of the day, which was the American election, I was regularly updating the delegates with the situation in America. And by the end of that day, I had one of the speakers from America who was in tears. She was apologetic for what had just happened in her country. She could not believe that her fellow Americans would be, she had words to describe Trump, but she just couldn't believe the situation that her country was about to plunge itself into. So for something completely different today, we are back in that scheme again. Trump is once again on the radar of American politics, and he may well be the next president of America. So we're going to talk about that today. Our speaker is Steve Okun. He is an individual with a career that's been at the intersection of business, government and sustainability. He's actually been in the Clinton administration. He has ties here to, very strong ties to Singapore. He's been here for the last 21 years. Yeah. And while he's been here, he's created and led public affairs in Asia, first for UPS, then for KKR, and he now works with private capital sector and corporates on both geopolitics and also on ESG. And he's a frequent political analyst for many global news organisations around the world. So he's well placed to talk on the topic today, which is the 2024 US presidential election and its impact on the climate crisis and what it will mean to the climate crisis. And I'm sure he's got some interesting facts to stick at us, and if you'd like to join in and ask questions, he has told me he welcomes that. Would you please all welcome Steve Okun, everyone?
Oh. Thank you very much, Chrissy. Thank you, Tribeca. Thank you, High Commissioner, for your kind words. So today we're going to talk about Biden versus Trump 2.0 and the fact that the climate crisis is on the ballot in the United States. So Chrissy introduced myself already, and so just as a disclaimer, yes, I worked in the Clinton administration, I worked in the White House, have worked on Democratic campaigns, and by the way, I thank you for not laughing when I put this picture up, because when I used this picture in Kuala Lumpur, the audience was just hysterical. So thank you for not laughing at this one. And so I don't do this, though, as a Democrat, because if I gave you Democratic talking points, it wouldn't do you any good. So I take off my Democratic hat and I put on a nonpartisan hat and try and give you straight analysis on this. And so my second disclaimer is that this is not investment advice. You want investment advice? Go to Tribeca. You want to hear about geopolitics and the US election, then you're in the right place. One last thing on this picture, which dawned on me as I was going through my slides to prepare this morning. This picture was taken about 28 years ago. And Bill Clinton today is younger than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So that's kind of the state of where we are in the US election. So before I begin, if this would not be a political talk if I didn't do a poll, you have to raise your hand. I'm going to give you two choices. So no, I don't know, or not who do you want, but who do you think is going to win? So how many people in this room think Joe Biden is going to win? That's 10, 11, maybe a few more. Okay, how many people in this room think Donald Trump is going to win? Just about everybody. And this is consistent. This is about the 10th presentation I've done this election cycle. And 90, sometimes it's even 100% think Donald Trump is going to win. And there's reasons why that is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it is that you all think Donald Trump is going to win, or the great majority of you, but why it's still just too soon to know what's going to happen and what the Biden pathway is to victory. So ideally, at the end of this presentation, you're going to walk away in the third group of businesses and investors who are looking at the U.S. election. Some people are looking at the U.S. election and they're pretending that it doesn't impact them. The world's going to go on regardless of whether it's Biden or Trump who wins, and so we can just move forward. The second group of businesses and investors who are looking at the U.S. election are in a panic. Chrissy told the story. People were actually crying when Donald Trump won. They don't want to think about what might happen if Donald Trump were to be president again and what it might mean for them, and so they then just ignore it. But what we really need to do as businesses and investors is to prepare for what is going to come, what is going to happen if Biden wins when it comes to US-China or Trump, what's going to happen to the climate and how the world is going to look at it, or how the Americans are going to look at it if it's Biden or Trump. And that has huge implications for all of us. So that's what we're going to close with today. Now, when we look at the US presidential election, the thing you have to keep in mind is that we do not have one US presidential election. We have 51 separate elections that all happen on the same day, because that's part of our process in the US through our Constitution. We have an electoral college, and every state has an independent election, and then they come together, normally without any rioting taking place, to then determine who's going to be our next president. And so in 2020, if you looked at this map, and I just put this map up, and you saw that Joe Biden won 306 to 232, you would say, well, Joe Biden won in a landslide. There's 538 votes in the Electoral College. Joe Biden wins 306, 232. You would say he won in a landslide. If I also told you, if you ignored each state election and looked at the popular vote and that Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes, you'd say, well, of course Joe Biden clearly won. But what you have to understand is that if 44,000 votes of those millions and millions and millions that were cast in the US, if 44,000 votes change in just 3 states, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, Donald Trump would be president today, had he not been impeached and convicted. So presumably he would have been impeached but not convicted, right? So Donald Trump would be president today, finishing up his second term. So that is how close we are in the United States. In 2016, Donald Trump only won by about 78,000 votes. And so there's no reason to believe that 2024 is going to be any different this time around. If Donald Trump holds all of the states he won, all those states in red, which he will, I can't imagine, with one exception, that Donald Trump is going to lose any of those red states. He just has to pick up another 37 electoral votes. And you can do the math and say, well, if he gets Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, he becomes president. If he gets Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, he becomes president. So that's all Trump has to do. And so this is what we're going to be watching. We're going to be watching just these 7 states. That's all that matters. So ignore the national polls. They give you a little bit directionally what's going on. Ignore what happens in the states like Florida that we know Trump is going to win, or California, we know Biden's going to win. What's going to happen in 7 states? And the United States has never been this polarized. When I worked on the '92 campaign, about 23 states were in play. 23 states could have gone to Clinton or could have gone to George Herbert Walker Bush. Now it's just down to these 7. And watch the polls in these 7 states and watch the very different campaigns that run in these 7 states. And then we're going to have a much better idea of who is going to win. Now, the first question I get from everybody when they know it kicks in that it's going to be Biden-Trump 2.0, they're like, really? This is what you people have out of 330 million people? For the last 3 presidential elections, you've had 3 candidates, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, and that's it? Don't you have anyone else who can run? And of course we do, but we've gotten here for 2 very different reasons for the way our parties are set up. In the Democratic Party, it's the elites who have decided that Joe Biden was going to be president. If you do polling amongst Democrats, are you happy it's Joe Biden? Do you think Joe Biden should run again? Most people would say no. They wanted somebody else. But the elites have decided it's best to have Joe Biden, because if we open up the Democratic primary, then it is going to be a fist fight. It's going to be a fist fight between the moderates and the liberals when it comes to immigration, when it comes to Israel, Gaza, when it comes to are we doing enough progressive things on taxes and student loans and along the like. And so whoever would have come out of that battle that might have even gone up to the convention for the Democrats would have been greatly wounded. And so Joe Biden, with his record and even with his age and even with his unpopularity, the elite said, we're going to make sure it's Joe Biden, and it was. The Republicans, the exact opposite. If you talk to the elites in the Republican Party, the former Republican Party, I almost should say, they despise Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell, who's the one or two of the most powerful Republicans in the country right now, he hasn't talked to Donald Trump since 2020, since December of 2020. There's just no support there. You see real establishment Republicans fleeing Congress. They're not even waiting till their term is up. They're leaving. They don't want to be part of the MAGA crowd. And so the elites do not want Donald Trump to be president, but the base did. That MAGA base is so strong that he was going to be president no matter what. And so that's why we have the matchup that we have, and that's really going to play out into who is going to win. Is it going to be the elites or is it going to be the base? And how are you going to, the Democrats need to figure out how the elites can help get the base to come out, and the Republicans need to figure out, will the elites follow the base? And that's really what this election is going to come down to. So as I said, very few people want this rematch. If you look at the top chart, right, this is from March 22nd, so pretty new, right? You know, 54% of people say they disapprove of this person. If you look at the second chart, right, 52.8% of people have an unfavorable view of him, right? The top one is Biden, the bottom one is Trump. So we're in a position where we have two very unpopular candidates. This is somewhat similar going back to 2016, but it's very rare that both candidates from both major parties are so unpopular. And it means we are going to have a very ugly elections cycle coming into November if you haven't figured that out already. And so the real question for this race is going to be, who will get the most double haters? We usually don't use the term double haters when it comes to presidential elections, but this was a term that was coined in 2016 because there were people who hated Hillary and hated Trump, and the question is, who were they going to break for? And in 2016, the double haters tended to break for Donald Trump. And the question was, then in 2020, there were double haters on both sides. They didn't like Democrats, they didn't like Biden, but they hated Trump as well. The double haters in 2020 broke for Biden. And the question in 2024, what are they going to do this time? And that is, again, one of the things to really watch. These very disaffected voters who hate both parties, they are going to figure out, they're going to drive the election. And so as we now roll into the campaign, just one quick question for you. How many people can name Donald Trump's campaign slogan? Just shout it out. Of course, right? Make America great again. Now, if I had a $10 bill, I would take it out because it's the same $10 bill I've used for every presentation. I'll give $10. I'll have to pay now it to you, though. How many people can tell me what Joe Biden's campaign slogan is? Well, you gotta be loud if you have a guess. No one. All right, my $10 stays safe. His campaign slogan is "Finish the job." Right? Finish the job. And this is part of the problem, but Biden has. I think probably everyone in this new room knows "Make America Great Again." I can just say MAGA, and you know what that means. But Biden's got to figure out, can he get his message out about what he has done for the country? And if he can do so, then he's got a much stronger chance of winning. But this is why he's polling where he's polling right now. And the prognosis for Democrats, and why you are justified to say you all think that Donald Trump, or 90% of you think Donald Trump is going to win, is because Joe Biden is facing a near historic deficit for an incumbent. American satisfaction for the way the country is going is pretty much at historic lows. And whenever we get this depressed as Americans, when we are so unsatisfied with the way things are going that only a fifth of Americans think that things are going the right way, the incumbent or his party loses. 1980, 1992, 2008, 2020, right? So Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, John McCain, and Donald Trump. They all lost because Americans were not happy. And this is where the U.S. is right now. Again, another reason why you're accurate in thinking that Donald Trump has a very strong chance to win. And that dissatisfaction translates into Joe Biden's approval ratings. Joe Biden has the lowest approval rating of any president in history. Now, when I say history, I'm really, I'm post-World War II. So post-World War II, Joe Biden has the lowest presidential approval rating 1 year out of anyone. And these include a lot of people who lost, like Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump and George H.W. Bush. They are all more popular than Joe Biden is at this stage right now. So again, Joe Biden's got a real hole to dig out of. And part of this is the age issue. And the special counsel just came out about a month ago, I think it was just about a month ago, and said that he chose not to prosecute, right, Joe Biden for withholding classified information because Joe Biden is a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. So now you have a third party, an independent third party who is validating everything that the American people are thinking about Joe Biden. He's too old. And what's happened is that while he and Donald Trump are pretty close in age, the difference in American people thinking that Biden is too old versus how they think about Trump is very different. Does he have the mental sharpness to be president? Biden, they say he does not. A lot of people say Trump doesn't either. But so this is something that the Biden campaign is going to have a very tough time overcoming because he is old. And how he's going to have to own that. But the other thing is you are going to see attack after attack after attack on Donald Trump for being literally just as old, just as misspoken as Biden could be, just as confused as Biden has been sometimes. Donald Trump is the same. And so this is from the Drudge Report, which used to be a very conservative website news aggregator. And so this is a headline that they put up after Donald Trump gave a speech and he referred to Melania as Mercedes. He mixed up her name. Now, so can the Democrats and the anti-Trump Republicans get it on a level playing field with the age? So watch these numbers as well, and just you're going to see so many attacks on Donald Trump's age. But even if you level out the playing field on age, the issue for Biden are the issues. The three most important issues to Americans overall in this election cycle. Immigration is number one, and that has never happened in the history of the United States. We have never had immigration as our top issue in a presidential campaign. It's usually not even in the top five. But when you have 2 million plus undocumented workers coming across our borders every year, and then those undocumented workers get bussed up to New York and Chicago and Denver and Democratic cities, and not just being in Texas, it changes everything. Immigration is the number one issue. Inflation and the economy are the second issue, if you combine those, and then crime is the third issue. So these are the top three issues for Americans. And again, Donald Trump beats Joe Biden by a lot in those three issues. He's up 30 points on immigration, 20 points on the economy, 20 points on violence. So again, you are all very justified to think that now, Biden's unpopular, Trump beats him on the issues, Trump should be the favorite. But, and this is a huge but you never know. And these are the things that I think the Biden campaign is going to be doing to try and get that second term. And there's three paths to victory for Biden. The first is he's got to run on his record. To finish the job, that is not going to cut it. He's got to figure out a way, and the Biden-Harris campaign has to figure out a way to get that message out. And they're going to count on an improving economy to do that. So that's number one. The second is on abortion. And then the third is on Trump himself, of course. Right? So in terms of the Biden-Harris accomplishments, They need to be felt. It is a great record in certain ways that they can run on. They can run on record low unemployment. They can run on investments in the United States. They can run on being the powerhouse on energy. The U.S. has never been the powerhouse on energy. The U.S. is the powerhouse on energy right now on oil, gas, and renewables. All three, the U.S. is better than every other country. The U.S. is better than every other country right now from an economic perspective. Yet Biden is getting no credit for that. So can Biden start to get some credit for that? And if the economy continues to improve, the presidential approval rating should be lagging that. It always lags it. So the question is, over the next 6 months, will that number bump up? So watch Biden's approval rating if the economy continues to improve. The second one is abortion. And this is what I think most people outside of the United States do not understand. Right? You've got to understand that in the history of the United States, a constitutional right has never been taken away from an American until the Supreme Court took away a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. They took away the constitutional right for reproductive freedoms. And this is a huge issue. And the Biden campaign is going into this full out. You would never, you talk about defending choice and restoring Roe. So the campaign is totally focused on that. In the history of the United States, a president or vice president has never been to an abortion clinic. Ever. You would never have done this as a Democrat. You were always going to be pro-choice. You would have used the words that Bill Clinton uses, right? I'm in favor of making, abortion should be, I think, safe, legal, and rare. Right? That was the framing that Clinton would have used in the 1990s. You had Vice President Harris go to an abortion clinic in Pennsylvania, one of those 7 swing states, of course. Right? This has never happened before. And Joe Biden, at the State of the Union, was exactly right when he said that those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women in America. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot and won in 2022, 2023, and they will find out in 2024. The Democrats have won or outperformed in every election since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And this is something that could make the difference over everything. Because you may say, especially if you're a woman, in particular, a younger woman in reproductive ages, you may say, Biden's too old. I hate what Israel is doing in Gaza. I hate that the U.S. is supporting it. But I'm not giving up my reproductive freedoms. And I'm going to hold my nose, and I'm going to vote for Biden. And we've seen that happen. And the question is, will that happen in this presidential election? Just one quick anecdote. How personal this is for people. A lot of my friends here, my age, their kids are either in college or getting ready to apply to college. And I have a number of women here who have told me, I will not allow my daughter to apply to college in a state that has banned abortion. Because what happens if there's an unplanned pregnancy? And does she have to leave the state? What if she doesn't know and she doesn't find out in time? And then if her boyfriend takes her, he's an accomplice to a crime? It's affecting people's lives today, even those people who live in Singapore thinking about sending their kids to school in the U.S. So I think that's the one thing that is, so if I asked this poll in the U.S., I bet it would have been about 50-50 Biden-Trump. Overseas, it's always 90-10 or more, and I think it's because there's not this understanding of how this issue is really going to play out. And then the third piece, of course, is Donald Trump. Right? And you've got to change this. If this election is on a referendum on Biden's first term, he will probably lose. If this election is on a choice between Biden and Trump, then you have a good chance to win, because that's what happened in a way in 2020. The election was about Donald Trump, therefore Joe Biden wins. And so when you have, I've never in my life would have predicted that you would have used Hitler in a campaign ad. I mean, Hitler, you wouldn't do it, because there was no fair comparison to Hitler for anything in the United States, anywhere in the world for the most part. Yet the Biden campaign is saying that Trump is parroting Hitler because they give him the language, he uses language that Hitler has used. And so will this make a difference? So these are the 3 pathways that Biden has to victory. Now, the last thing that's going to make this election very hard to predict, a big wild card, is a desire for third parties. Third party is the desire is at a historic level. And so my friend Kyle Kondik, fellow UVA person, University of Virginia where I went, Kyle says this puts a haze over the entire battlefield, right? So we just don't know what's going to happen with third parties. Normally they can't swing an election, but they can swing an election in Michigan. They can swing an election in Arizona or Nevada. And so I don't know how many people know any of these three people. Just raise your hand. Not the Americans. I don't want you to raise your hand. All right, who can you name on this? Kennedy, right? Yeah, you can name one. Most people can name, no one can name all three. Cornel West, right, professor, used to be professor at Princeton, professor at Harvard. He's running in Michigan. He's polling very well. He is running a very much a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli campaign. He may be able to get enough voters in Michigan to swing that state, and that could be the difference in this election. Jill Stein, she's the Green Party candidate. She cost Hillary Clinton 2 states in 2016. It didn't matter because she would have lost anyway. So can the Green Party make a difference this time around? And 1 or 2 states here can swing the difference. And of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is running. We don't know if he'll pull more votes from Trump or Biden, but the presumption is he'll pull more votes from Biden. And if you get all 3 of these on a ballot in any of those 7 states, it can make a difference. So this one's really a wild card that we can watch. And of course, there's one person who I haven't mentioned who can totally turn the election. Right. This one is very worrying to the right. If Taylor Swift comes out, who knows? She drove geopolitics here, right? She drove questions to the Prime Minister, and she was on the agenda for the Prime Minister of Thailand and in Philippines, and she was asked in Australia. They asked Prime Minister Lee about Taylor Swift, so let's watch this one. But really, this, when you're talking about 10,000, 20,000 votes, if she comes out and endorses, who knows what that can do. So my only certain prediction that I'm going to make this year is that whoever wins will be the oldest president being sworn in, because Biden will be the oldest, but Trump is older than Biden was in his first term. So either Biden or Trump will be the oldest president. I think that's about the only certainty we have right now. So I'm going to talk about climate change. I'll take any 1 or 2 burning questions. We'll come back to the end. So we'll talk about, go ahead. Hey, Rob. So the question is, what impact will Kamala Harris being his vice president be on this ticket, given that Biden would be 86 at the end of his second term? That's certainly what the Republicans want you to be asking yourself, because while Joe Biden is unpopular, Vice President Harris is even more unpopular. And so there's no, I can't give you a historical analogy because it never comes up. It's never happened before. It is very rare for the VP to drive anyone's vote. And I can give you a couple exceptions, but they're the exception that prove the rule. So the Democrats' hope is it doesn't come up and it doesn't change anything, and people are just focusing Biden versus Trump. And that is certainly the historical precedent, but it's certainly something, let's see if the Republicans can change that, because they're going to try. They're going to try. Yep, Allaster. Yeah. So the questions are right. We talk about those 7 states. Think about those 7 states as 3 different campaigns. So you've got North Carolina and Georgia. You've got a southern campaign. You've got Arizona and Nevada, right? The western campaign, and then you've got the industrial Midwest, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Right? And so in the South, the question is, what is going to happen in particular to black men? Black men in the last election very much voted for Biden over Trump. If you look at polling numbers now, that's a lot softer. Biden still wins a majority, but it's softer. So what Donald Trump is going to try and do in those states is peel off some of those black voters. Either stay at home or come out and vote for me. And it is why I would predict that Donald Trump is going to take Tim Scott, who is a black Southern senator, as his running mate. I think that's what he would do to get that vote. Then the Hispanic vote, what the Biden campaign is going to have to do is say, well, you may not be happy about immigration in Nevada and Arizona, but Donald Trump has talked about how immigrants poison the blood of our country. And you may not be happy with me, but think about the choice. And so the Biden campaign is going to try and do that in the South. And then when it comes to Gaza, especially in Michigan, they'll try and do the same thing. Okay, remember, Donald Trump put a Muslim ban in. You're going to vote for, you're a Muslim and you're mad at me, but you're going to vote for somebody who wants to ban Muslims from our country? And so can that change things? And so that's the battle, right? How do you battle over those demographics in those different states? And can you get your base out? Can you pull all that off? So that's what's the inside baseball of what to watch in those. And then comes to the election and sustainability. As I said, climate is on the ballot in 2024. And so if we think about what the Biden administration has done, when at a fundraiser about a month ago, one of the donors asked Joe Biden, what worries you the most? I thought his answer was pretty surprising and pretty revealing. He said, we have a crazy SOB like that guy Putin and others, and we always have to worry about nuclear conflict, but the existential threat to humanity is climate. Right? That is what Joe Biden truly believes, and his administration has acted on it. And their record, right, the Biden term 1.0, is extraordinarily impressive if you look at it from a legislative perspective, you look at it from a global perspective. Right? Very engaged internationally and very successful from a legislative perspective. And so what we've seen, right, out of the Inflation Reduction Act in particular, it's one of the largest investments ever in the American economy. It's the largest, maybe, legislative impact of climate in the history of the world, again, because it's the US, and it's a mix of carrots and sticks. That is what happened in Biden 1.0. And in Biden 2.0, all of that stays, and the regulatory state becomes even more focused on the climate. You're going to continue to see the US aim for net zero by 2050. You're going to see tougher limits on emissions, which is going to boost EV sales. You're going to see an increase in funding for the Environmental Protection Agency administration. You could potentially end oil subsidies, and you're going to continue to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, into global climate finance, which is something that every investor needs to be aware of, and I'm sure you already are and are looking to take advantage of that. Now, Trump 1.0, he was a speed bump when it came to climate. It wasn't a brick wall. I mean, Trump could not come in, and even though even though he believes that we shouldn't have windmills in the ocean because they kill birds, he was not able to stop the progress in climate, but he was a speed bump on it, and certainly took actions like pulling out of Paris, which he famously did in his first term. So the question is, what would Trump 2.0 do? He'll pull out of Paris again. I don't think there's any doubt for that. He'll end or at least minimize U.S. participation in the COP summits. You can decide how much will that do. What will other countries do in reaction to the U.S. walking away from its international commitments that it has now, including reneging on all of the U.S. pledged finance? He probably can't repeal all of the Inflation Reduction Act, but he can make changes to it from an executive perspective that are going to have impacts to what the U.S. is doing now, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. He has said that he is going to slash EPA funding. He's going to redistribute that power from the federal government to the state governments. ESG will continue to be a four-letter word in the United States under the Trump administration. So he will ban investments in 401k plans by executive order, and there is a lot of federal money that goes into these 401ks. So that is going to dry up some investing into ESG. And then when it comes to the bipartisan infrastructure law, which also has a climate impact, that's one of the two major pieces of legislation of the Biden administration. So what's going to happen to that EV charging network? So all of these things, there will be a rollback under Trump. And so the question is, what's going to get rolled back? How is that going to impact the US? What's that going to mean for other countries as well? So there will certainly be an impact from a Trump win. Businesses have already said that Trump's plans to gut the IRA will hurt US EV sales. So Nissan, General Motors, already taking steps on this to figure out what is it that they should be doing if we get this huge change in January of next year. Now, something that will not change is human rights. Biden and Trump are aligned on human rights, somewhat for different reasons. But there will be an increasing focus on human rights in the supply chain. The United States has said that there is a genocide that is taking place in Xinjiang. The Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act has said that the presumption is anything that is manufactured in Xinjiang is manufactured with forced labor and will be banned from the United States unless you can prove otherwise. It's very difficult to make that, to overcome that rebuttable presumption. And so both the Trump administration and the Biden administration will focus on that, and they will not only focus on exports from China, they are looking at transshipments. So if something is coming out of Xinjiang into Vietnam, into Malaysia, into Singapore, that's renewable related because 50% of polysilicon comes from Xinjiang, that is potentially going to be banned from being exported to the United States. And you not only have action from the federal government under Biden or Trump, California will continue to take state action. They have a Transparency in Supply Chain Act. California will require Scope 3 emissions to be reported. And remember, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. And if California requires Scope 3 emissions, well, that's everybody in this room, right? We're the Scope 3 emissions that go to the United States because it's our Scope 1 and Scope 2. So you have to be planning for how you are going to be reducing your emissions under a Trump or Biden administration. And so all of that focus is going to continue regardless of who wins. So what is it that you should be asking yourself today, whether you think it's going to be Trump or whether you think it's going to be Biden? One question is, have we gotten to the point with climate and to a lesser degree human rights? Is this being demand driven? Are your customers and are your employees going to demand you address the climate crisis? Are they going to demand that you make sure that there is no forced labor or slave labor in your operations or supply chain? And if that's the case, it doesn't matter who wins. What is the US going to do when we are going to be having our own electricity crisis, especially when you have all of this demand for energy coming up with AI? Because without transmission, there's no transition. And so what is that going to mean in terms of all of this playing out? And that's going to play out regardless of who wins. And then the other piece is that while a lot of businesses are focused on the physical risk of climate change, they're focused on the transition risk of climate change. They're focused on what is it that we're doing to the planet and how can we reduce that? How can we reduce our emissions? How we'll put solar on the roofs of our warehouses, or we'll change over to EV for our distribution. Right now, you're improving how you're treating the planet, but the planet is going to have an impact on you. And the planet doesn't care about who's in office, and the planet doesn't care if you have solar panels on your roof. You're going to have to deal with heat, you're going to have to deal with flooding, you're going to have to deal with drought, you're going to have to deal with increased intensity of storms. And what's going to happen to insurance? What's going to happen to law? What's going to happen to regulation? That's going to come regardless. So what we need to do from a climate perspective is start with the business fundamentals, understand the future, and then we can figure out how this is going to have a Biden 2.0 or a Trump 2.0. And so this is, in closing, this is a commentary I wrote a couple months ago for Eco Business. I used to say, as Chrissy did my introduction. I used to say I work at the intersection of business and government, but now I say I work at the collision of business and government, because that's where we are. And ESG is really where those two collide. And so it's not enough to have an ESG policy anymore. You now have to think ESGG, because geopolitics is impacting the environment, it's impacting society, and it's impacting governance and what's going to be expected of you as you set up your businesses and your investments. So with that, I think we have 1 minute and 36 seconds left. So any closing questions? Okay, so if you look at polling, right, if people say if Donald Trump gets convicted, that will impact how they think about him. Now, it's not going to change the MAGA group. They're with him no matter what. In fact, it may make them even more tied to Trump. But if Trump becomes convicted in a court, and there's only really one realistic chance for this to happen, and it's in New York State, and what happened in New York is that the short version of it is that he had an extramarital affair with a porn star. The porn star was going to come out and say this right before the election. They had to pay her off, so they gave her, I think it was about $150,000 and for a hush money payment. And what New York State is saying is that that violated election law, because you were doing this. It's an illegal donation. You had to disclose it because you were doing this to help you win the presidency. If he's found guilty of that, and that's the only trial that's realistically that could happen between now and the election, it might swing just enough voters, especially people who are going to look at all of the salaciousness of this trial, and it could make a difference. But that's the only one. But it's really on the margins. The cases that really could have changed it, the insurrection cases, the mishandling of classified documents cases, those trials aren't going to likely happen with a conviction before Election Day. All right, Chrissy, did I hit it right?
You did an absolutely brilliant job. Would you put your hands together, please, everyone?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Certainly thought-provoking. Be interesting to see if Taylor Swift does have any effect in the future. Some terms that we didn't know before. That was brilliant. And Steve, you're sticking around for a little while this morning? Are you sticking around for a little while this morning? Yeah. I think it's a cone of silence. Happens when people go down those stairs, isn't it? People can't hear us. Right, our final address this morning before we break, and we're going to have a 15-minute break from this room, just so we can clear everything down and get things ready for the rest of the program today, is being made on behalf of Invest and Trade Western Australia. And the gentleman who's coming up to join us is Eric Tan. Now, Eric is a Singaporean. He's been in demand all over the world by different organisations, and Western Australia was astute enough to snaffle him up recently for the Invest and Trade Western Australia Singapore office, where he is connecting companies and innovators and investors. Would you please make him welcome, everyone?
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Eric Tan. I'm actually privileged on behalf of the Western Australia Invest and Trade Western Australia Singapore office to give you so I'd like to recognize Australia High Commissioners, His Excellency Allaster Cox, and also our keynote speakers for the group events. Yeah. So basically, as the Invest and Trade Western Australia, we are very delighted actually to sponsor this breakfast, and the world actually has a growing demand for energy, especially clean energy. So means Western Australia actually is the forefront of this, of next waves of global energy productions. So in Western Australia's reserve of natural gas, basically is one of the most important source of energy in the transitions of carbon, of the economy. And of course, we have unmet opportunities for generate renewable energies. And Western Australia basically is the largest producer of lithium. And of course, among all the reserve in the world, which actually for all the battery minerals. And I'd like to say Western Australia basically We have many companies here actually today in this morning. You are actually at the leading edge of technology, not only in mining, processing, petroleum chemicals, and technical services, but they are actually in the technologies that are actually very relevant to the battery industries. All right. So the government of Australia has and trade offices, including here in Singapore, where we actually are committed to facilitate the trading investment opportunities between our two regions, working very closely with support the transitions of the energy transitions. And we welcome all of you to join us in this journey. All right. And I'd like to take these opportunities to thank everyone here, to express my great gratitude for you to join us this morning in this breakfast. And I wish all of you here to have a fruitful conference ahead. And I believe that you will gain fresh insights and also form valuable partnerships during your stay here. So I'd like to close this with a video sharing with you on Western Australia is actually your preferred choice of investment destination. Thank you. Bye.
Western Australia is truly like no other. From stunning to world-leading innovation, technology and research, Western Australia offers a welcoming and inclusive to visit, work, study and do business. Voted one of the most livable cities in the world, Perth boasts vibrant dining experience and world-class. Our ancient and majestic landscapes are rich in history and culture. Together, we're forging a dynamic future from a position of economic strength. Our world-leading industries are brimming investment and trade opportunities, including tourism, events in the arts, education, energy, mining and technology, space, health, medical sciences, and primary industries. Sharing a time zone with over half of the world population makes it so easy to invest in, buy from, travel to, work in, and study. It's like no other.
It certainly is. I actually had the great honour of hosting a Western Australian travel show, also a Western Australian innovation show and a Western Australian show based on resources and mining. So I'm across all of those things. And if you'd like to talk at length about them to me later on, I'm willing to have a chat. But right now, my job is to invite you all to stand up and walk outside the room because we need to set it up for the program of events. Can I ask you all please to put your hands together though for our speakers first up. It was a brilliant morning, a great breakfast. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your time this morning. We'll be back in this room, everyone, at 10:15. Give 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, good morning team and welcome to our first session for the final day of the conference. Lovely to have your company. For those of you who've just joined us, welcome. And there is the opportunity, of course, to catch up with this morning's speech on our YouTube channel if you would like to do so. Now, we're starting off today with a panel session and we have an esteemed group of experts who are going to lead this discussion with us, and you're more than welcome to join in at any stage. So the topic is Sustainable Aviation Fuel, Reinventing Hydrocarbons, and our moderator for this panel is Ed Mason. Now, Ed is the Chief Executive Officer for Jet Zero. I did check the program as well for a typo, but Jet Zero is a legitimate entity. So would you like to come up and join us, Ed? And as he comes up, he does have a former foot in the resources industry as well. He tells me he's a reformed resources industry person. So it's going to be Ed's job to introduce our panel today. So would you please make him very welcome?
Thank you for the introduction. So joining me on stage, I'll ask Edward Choi from Alperion Bioenergy, who is the Chief Strategy and Investment Officer for Alperion. Then we've got Genevieve, who is the Head of Marketing for Flyoro, a homegrown company here for Singapore. And then we've got Thomas McMahon, CEO of ACX, one of the largest carbon exchange. Welcome them on stage. Thank you. So sustainable aviation fuel, this is a very exciting industry, and it's, I think, if you're at a future-facing commodity conference, I couldn't be more excited about SAF as a commodity. When I benchmark what we, critical minerals and other kind of products that are needed to decarbonise the transport sector. As a sort of scene setter, we've got a great lineup of speakers today, primarily because we represent each part of the supply chain. In our period, him to introduce in a second, that company is one of the largest collators of feedstock to make sustainable aviation fuel. Based in Singapore, they collect a lot of waste products from around this region. Many of that waste product is used in integration of sustainable aviation fuel. My company, Jet Zero Australia, is one of the leading developers of sustainable aviation fuel projects in Australia. We have a partnership with Alperion, so looking at projects elsewhere, and so we sit in the production stage of the supply chain. We then have Thomas, who represents the carbon aspect, and this is all about carbon and decarbonising the aviation sector. And then Genevieve's company is on the blending and distribution into airports. So we've got the supply chain covered here, which is a rare occurrence actually on stage. So the aviation sector represents about 3% of the emissions of carbon in the entire world. It's one of the largest contributors of CO2 emissions in the transport sector. And when we look at solutions to decarbonise transport, we have clearly electrification, light vehicles. When we look at the marine sector, there are many solutions on hand, and I think medium to long role in it. But when we look at the aviation sector, I can tell you right now, we are not going to be flying on hydrogen electric aircraft for a long time, particularly on long-haul travel. There is a role for haul hops, but when we're looking at long travel distance, particularly Singapore, which has got some long destinations to travel to, sustainable aviation fuel is the solution. It's still 7 times the energy density as the most efficient battery out there today. So we cannot physically make a battery to fit inside a plane that's going to travel the distances we need. If we liquefy it around the world, SAF is still 4 times the energy density of liquid hydrogen at minus 50 degrees. I mean, at 253 degrees, it's not going to be easy to move. So, and how it's going to meet these aggressive decarbonisation targets set, and most airlines have said, SAF is the solution. So what is SAF? It's still kerosene or jet fuel. Some key differences is it has a slightly better energy density qualities, and it has no aromatics and sulfur, which means less contrails or coming out the back of the engine. And then importantly, it reduces carbon emissions by around 7%. And if we are to meet net zero by 2050, which a lot of airlines under IATA have committed to do, then that is the solution to move forward. And if you try and translate that into a trajectory from a few billion litres of production here today in the world, including Singapore, which has a plant operated by Neste in production of SAF, to about a $500 billion litre market by 2050. This has got one of the most aggressive demand curves you can see out any commodity. On top of that, if you break down just the mandates alone, there's going to be demand for about 160 billion litres by 2050. And when I say mandates today, France, Sweden, and Norway, and on all flights leaving those countries. Next year, all of Europe has mandated a 2% SAF blend for flights going in and out of that country. Singapore a few weeks ago announced a 1% SAF blend by 2026, ramping up to 2 to 5%. Japan also announced a 10% SAF mandate blend by 2030. That's a very aggressive target. So whether you believe it or not, the demand for this commodity is coming, and we need to provide supply of that. So one of the biggest feedstock suppliers of SAF, which goes into the production process, and Edward, to talk about your business and how you see the opportunity for the SAF sector.
Sure. Thank you, Edward, for the introduction. So first of all, my name is Edward. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Apparent Bioenergy. We were set up 16 years ago. Now we operate across 10 countries. We are the largest collector of used cooking oil in this part of the world. So when we look at demand, right, as Ed mentioned, it's really without doubt that SAF demand is gonna hit. It's all driven by environmental policies that are already enshrined in the law, right? But when it comes to supply, it's really the bottleneck of the sector when it comes to feedstock. For example, in the US and the EU, almost everything that can be collected is collected. But when it comes to this part of the world, you look at Southeast Asia. So we recently engaged a management consultant to conduct a market study of how much feedstock is being collected now. And in Southeast Asia, the answer is only 17%. So the rest of the 83% is going down the drain. So when we look at what we are doing, we are actively expanding the market as well as educating, raising awareness of how we should be disposing the used cooking oil correctly. So of course, there is a huge sustainability angle when it comes to our business, right? A lot of people, when they talk about sustainability, they only focus on E, with a carbon tunnel vision, right? With the carbon savings aside, I think there is a very important social angle here as well with our business. So you look at Southeast Asia, right? Earlier, I briefly mentioned about the awareness of illegal recycling of oil. In Indonesia, when you go to a hawker center on the street, you know how many times they recycle the used cooking oil? So there is a huge health hazard there. Aside from that, a lot of the local collector, we are empowering the economy there and giving them, jobs. And we saw some of the collectors switching from a banking career to collect oil from us. And some of them, make some pretty good money in doing that as well. But all in all, I think there is huge potential, in this part of the world when it comes to collecting waste-based feedstocks in Southeast Asia. And that's something we are focusing on in the short and medium term. Yeah, so this is what we're doing here at Apparent. I guess I will pass it to Thomas to talk about the credit side, carbon credit side of things.
Thank you very much. And nice to be here. I mean, my background is I come out of the commodity trading industry, and I began in the agricultural markets. So I have a lot of respect for what you're doing relative to the back end of oil. And then I moved into the energy space, and over the last 5 years, I've been working in air carbon ACX in the decarbonization space, right? The mitigation of our carbon footprints, and aviation is a large part of that. I built this here in Singapore. And the original name was Air Carbon. We were focused on aviation, and this was pre-COVID. And we thought that the airlines, including the state airline here, would be very, very proactive in adoption of a decarbonization policy. That was a false thought on my part. They don't care. They care today. And the reason why they care today is because the government has told them after 5 years and coming out of COVID, all of us have either flown here from another place or we're flying locally, and we know that the costs have gone up dramatically. Aviation is very happy that COVID is over, and they're very happy to stay above their 2019 all-time previous peak. And now they've got to start to mitigate. And how do they mitigate? My company was set up through carbon credits, thinking that you would buy a voluntary credit which would offset that position in the aviation on a per passenger, per flight, per route basis, per mile. And that was incorrect because the word voluntary is there and they're not going to do anything unless they're mandated. So now we've flipped it on its head, and now you've got a regulation that says that they have to decarbonize, and it's SAF that's going to be their feedstock. That's significantly different, and it changes the metric of demand fundamentally, and where the benefit for both of these people. They're on the supply side, as is Ed. I'm on the trading side. We want a clear price signal for this fuel, and also too, you want the whole stream of supply. So interesting, one of the things that we've set up, besides trading carbon credits, is now we've set up a biofuels division. So we can trade UCOME and we can trade SAF as the supply chain comes up. But companies like Vopak, which may not be a name many people are familiar with, but Vopak runs storage facilities, tank farms, and they just dedicated a series of tanks here in Singapore that will be solely dedicated for biofuel storage. For trading and transportation. And that's really important to see how markets will scale as a result of it. So all of the pieces are falling in place, as well as the regulation. So now it's not voluntary, it's mandatory, and that changes the nature of this business and the opportunity going forward. So over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we've heard a lot from pretty much the upstream side, and also how trading works, especially for credits. For us, my name is Genevieve from Fly Oro. I focus a lot into the blending side of things for sustainable aviation fuels. So just think of us like an espresso machine, but instead for coffee beans, we do it for SAF. And we want to try to be able to put a blending system at any point of the supply chain that makes sense. Now we think about conventionally what happens now. Blending is done upstream, directly at refineries. Once it's blended, then you deliver your SAF, your blended SAF, all the way to the airport. But we want to be able to decouple that and place it at the point, be it midstream or even last mile downstream directly at the airports. And the reason we do so is a few things. We want to be able to benefit as many stakeholders as possible in the supply chain. So for one side of things, we are able to actually help to benefit suppliers like Ed to be able to have more blending hubs available and to be able to have access to these airports and supply their fuels to these airports and to these airlines. And for the airline's point of view, by having a blending machine like ours, we are able to pass down control and flexibility to them, where they are able to decide the blending ratio and volume that they would like to procure according to the market scene and cost. And I think it's very important for us to be aware that SAF itself is extremely expensive compared to Jet A1. It could be 3 times more expensive, and that's the reason why we see it moving very slow without any incentives or mandates. So as what Ed has mentioned earlier, Singapore, we already rolled out a mandate, 1%. This will also plan to increase to 3 to 5% starting from 2030, and that depends on how the supplies come online. We expect to have more supplies coming up end of this year and the following year as well. And currently, what Singapore does is actually a very new concept, not seen in any other markets before, which is to set a passenger SAF levy. And this is a fixed cost between $3 and $16. So if you were to fly, for example, from Singapore to London, you have to pay a $16 SAF levy that's already borne into your ticket price, your flight ticket. And the reason why they do this is because they want to create certainty to consumers like ourselves, whereby we know how much we're paying for, which is a fixed price, and with that consolidated cost that's being aggregated, they will actually purchase fuel, SAF, from all these suppliers that will fly out of Singapore airport. So moving forward, we want to be able to also support these airports who have ambitions to actually try and get these SAF molecules and to basically supply all of the airlines.
Thank you, that's a great speech. I wanted to also add and talk a little bit about the other benefits other than just environmental that this industry has. We have 3 projects under development in Australia. Our most advanced project, Ulysses, named after Queensland butterflies up in Townsville. It's a $700 million SAF project. which will supply about 100 million litres of SAF by 2028. We are a big employer in that region. We're going to have close to 1,000 construction workers, but 100 full-time employees. But we're also providing fuel security in a region which is a big focus for the Army up there. And so we've been working very closely with Defence and others on that. And we know across the supply chain there are other industries that are feeding off the growth of this in Australia. In the technology we use in our plant, we also produce renewable diesel. We have a lot of interest from the mining sector for that renewable diesel, particularly in central Queensland. So again, we're involving a broad spectrum other than our partners, and I probably should have mentioned, we've had some great backing from an investment from Qantas, Airbus, and more recently Idemitsu from Japan that came in. And we've found that the industry is collaborating very well across regions. We've worked closely with all these people on stage here today and had strong support from both the Singapore and Australian governments for developing this industry together. So it has a very exciting future for that reason. And as I said, not just about the decarbonisation story, but also about other social benefits that this industry brings. I might throw over to Edward, because you're at the coalface of feedstock that we often hear is the challenge. What other risks and what particular risks within that space do you see going forward for growth in the SAF industry?
Sure. When it comes to the feedstock part of supply chain, I think there are two main risks. First one is really geopolitical risk. If you look at how most countries, when they understand feedstock is a bottleneck, they might implement certain export restrictions, as we have seen in Indonesia. There was some export ban, right? As of now, in the short term, we don't see much of these regulations, but going forward, when each countries would like to adopt SAF, would that be a problem, right? So there's one thing we're looking at, right? There's one risk here. And the second one is really when it comes to the sustainability certifications, especially when it comes to traceability. I'm not sure if the audience here have heard of this news, but in the second half of last year, there was a shipment of biodiesel from China to the EU, where the Chinese biodiesel company fraudulently used new cooking oil rather than used cooking oil to produce biodiesel, right? And as a result of this, there was an investigation from the EU into all the Chinese exported volume, but that's only because our sector is still very, very early stage. That's why we think a lot of these compliance and sustainability certifications will need to be implemented more rigorously, so that that will make the whole sector work. So these are the two risks that I see.
Great. And Thomas, on that, provenance, traceability, we hear about it, it's important.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably also worth, telling everyone how much these carbon certificates are worth in the SAF space. And they're a lot different to ACCUs and everything else you see. There's a huge premium. And for that reason, also a good financing solution for a lot of these projects.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You mentioned the enhancement. And when you bring new technologies or you change the use case of an existing supply stream, like used cooking oil, it's a game changer. I mean, for us, one of the things that we're seeing, and I've been on a number of phone calls over the last few weeks with people who are going to produce SAF in a lot of very unique ways. When you use cooking oil yourself, your cane feedstock, potentially. I was talking to guys last night from Florida, and they're going to use something called king grass, which it exists in certain regions of the world. It's very, what's called, in terms of North America, it's the sub-free zone, meaning above and below freezing lines in North America. But you've got this pyrolytic production facility, and you have the cellulitic, and those are the feedstocks, right? And you understand this, Ed, very much the science on that. But this is the opportunity to open up really the carbon credit market as a subsidy market. It enhances or incentivizes the change of behavior. And we know that today, that a SAF-based carbon credit that can be attached to production from any one of these three persons is worth about $16 per ton. And we're talking about demand well in excesses of 100 million tons, in terms of in heading towards, like, from liters of production versus to tons on the underlying. This in and of itself, the transportation industry can support a $500 to $1 billion industry just from a subsidy standpoint, meaning the carbon credits that are created on the basis of SAF production, the enhancement. So this is an investable asset class, just on that basis alone. So, yeah.
No, thanks, Tom. And Genevieve, one question for you. You've been a success story here in Singapore with the business growth. Can we expect to see these blending facilities in Australia anytime soon?
Yes, we actually recently just signed a deal to move into the state of Queensland. So more details will be up, but basically what we want to do is to be able to set more blending hubs around the world. And we also actually just closed our pre-Series A round, investment round, just recently, a few months back. And basically our focus is really a lot into the Australian market and also into the US. Why the US? Mainly because, especially in the West Coast, is very driven by incentives. And that's where we want to be able to situate ourselves as well, because a lot of suppliers are there too. Australia market, the government is actually trying a lot, supporting supplier side, and also they are also looking at doing a mandate. So we are also going to be positioning ourselves there and be ready when it comes online.
Right. Well, look, I think we're out of time. Look, this is a new industry. A lot of people don't understand it. Please reach out to any of us if you need to understand more or looking for opportunities to work with any of us in what we're doing. Yeah, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you so much, Shane. Really informative and nice to see the innovations as well coming out of Australia. Thank you. Would you put your hands together for our panel? Livening things up this morning. Right, now, I'd ask you all to take a chair with you as you leave, but that might be a bit rude. We'll do our own redecorating as we leave today. There we go, everyone's well trained. You can take one chair. There we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going back to, well, before we do our resources presentations for you this morning, we do have one special bit of educational presentation to go. I'd like to invite our representative up here, please. Chong, if you can come and join us. So we're going to look to, we've heard a lot of talk about the ASX. We're going to talk now to the SGC, the Singapore Exchange. And this gentleman that's coming up here, we've met him before. He's a great talker and he's a great educator. So if you didn't have the opportunity of seeing him in person before, this is a great opportunity. And you'll be sticking around, won't you, Chong, to speak to people afterwards today as well.
Right,
yes?
thank you.
So I know the sound is a bit hard on this stage, so it's hard to talk to someone across the stage. So I'll introduce you, then I'll let you go. This is Chong Foong, so he is from the SGX, and if people would like to come and talk with you afterwards, what I said, there is the opportunity to come and chat with you afterwards if they have any questions to raise.
Yes, that's great. I would love that if you have questions.
Great. Please make him welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much for being here this morning. Thank you to Stuart and for putting together this great event. So my name is Chong Lek. I'm from the SGX. I've been at the exchange for 13 years. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and then after that, I will tell you about the market structure, and after that, give you some ideas for the listing rules and some case studies as well. So you may ask, what do I do at SGX? The brochure says family office, and how is that relevant? So the exchange is like this. It's like many other companies. I joined the exchange 13 years ago, and they gave me an assignment. And like many other corporates, after a few years, if you don't die or quit, you get another assignment. So this has happened to me a few times. So these assignments are all additional. I started my career doing origination for mineral oil and gas companies. I also then took a role looking after all the listed companies in SGX. And now I also run the family office team. And I'll explain how that's relevant to mining companies shortly. So this is a slide that talks about Singapore as a global strategic hub. And in particular, it's used to talk about why family offices set up in Singapore. I was at an event last year, the Milken Institute event, where I heard Ray Dalio speak. Ray, as you know, is the founder of Bridgewater, one of the world's largest hedge funds. And he has set up his family office here. And this is what he explained. He said, if you want to set up your family office, you have to look at 3 factors. One is the country's balance sheet. You need a country with a strong balance sheet. And in fact, Singapore is AAA rated. Second, you have to pick a country that has the right geopolitical leaning that you're comfortable with. And thirdly, you have to pick a place where you're comfortable with and where everything works. So I think that, in summary, is why a lot of global family offices have set up in Singapore. This is a slide which briefly introduces SGX. Now, when I joined the exchange, I used to think of SGX as a stock exchange, but from about 7 years ago, we've had a pivot. We now are a multi-asset exchange. Cash equities now accounts for less than 30% of our revenues, and in fact, the growth areas include derivatives, fixed income, currency, and commodities, and of course, data. I come from global sales and origination. We're the market-facing team that we focus on encouraging more investments into the Singapore market and also companies to list here as well. This slide talks about the other forms of cooperation that SGX has. And in the exchange world now, we do a lot of collaborations and partnerships with other exchanges. I'll just talk about a few examples. For example, we have a partnership with the New Zealand exchange, and we trade dairy products on SGX. We have a collaboration with the Stock Exchange of Thailand for the trading of depository receipts. So Singapore-listed companies listing and trading depository receipts in Thailand and vice versa. And of course, we have a number of capital raising MOUs with NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and with Tadawul. This slide talks about Singapore as the gateway to institutional capital. Now, the statistics show from the Monetary Authority of Singapore that there is nearly 5 trillion Singapore dollars in AUM here in Singapore. And you find a huge collection, including global investors. You can see the who's who of global investors will have a presence here, whether it's BlackRock or Fidelity or Prudential. There's also a number of sovereign wealth funds. So Singapore has 2, but it's not just the Singapore wealth funds. You've got Norges, you've got the Koreans, and even the Chinese pension funds, which are here. We have a number of Chinese investors, and this is not just the QDII funds. There's a number of Chinese corporates that are heavily invested in the Singapore market. And on top of that, you can see the nationality of the depository accounts. There's more than 30,000 Chinese citizens that have custodian accounts here at a central depository. On top of that, Singapore is the gateway to South and Southeast Asia. We can see there's more than 240 Southeast Asian citizens that have depository accounts here, and more than 20,000 Indians. Importantly, Singapore has become a hub for family offices. So what is a family office? This is when the entrepreneur decides he wants to try and create a vehicle for wealth preservation purposes, amongst other objectives, and he creates the family office. Now, we've always paid close attention to this family office and high net worth segment in Singapore because it's something which makes the Singapore capital markets unique. But the numbers have changed quite substantially. In the year 2020, the Economic Development Board announced that there were about 400 single family offices that were based in Singapore. And by 2022, the Monetary Authority announced that there were 1,100 of these single family offices. So you may be wondering, what does this mean and how is this relevant? Now, the MAS statistics very specifically refer to those single family offices that have successfully applied for the 13O or 13U tax exemptions. Okay? And under these tax exemptions, there is a very specific capital deployment requirement. These single family offices would have to deploy the lesser of $10 million or 10% of their AUM into the Singapore capital markets under 3 different buckets, either equities, which are listed on an MAS-approved exchange, fixed income, or funds. Okay, so I think that's one of the interesting things about the Singapore market. We've got a large pool of family offices that have set up here in Singapore over the last 2 to 3 years, and there is a requirement for them to essentially deploy capital into SGX-listed product. So if you're thinking about your own company and you want to list or you want to fundraise, I would argue that Singapore has the right profile. It's a AAA rated country, it's geopolitically neutral, it's a trading hub, it's very well connected with the rest of the world. And on top of that, there is a very unique set of investors here in the Singapore market which have an interest to invest. Here's a slide that talks about the commodity sector. I'll talk about commodities, not specific to mining, so you can get a better overall view. We're especially strong in agricultural commodities. We've got 14 listings, more than $25 billion in market cap. We have a number of coal companies. We have some companies in the steel value chain that are in the mining of iron ore. We have a number of companies in industrial mining, and of course, some gold. And I think the one takeaway I'd like you to have is that there's a lot of headroom for expansion. This isn't like some of the other commodity-heavy markets where you may have hundreds or even 1,000 junior miners. There's plenty of room for more mining companies to list on SGX. And we have 2 boards, a main board for established companies and a catalyst for fast-growing companies. The distinction is just branding and regulatory. Both stocks listed on either board still trade in the same cash equities market. Now, the main board has a more established branding and it tends to attract greater institutional following. The catalyst has a bit faster time to market, and when it comes to the headroom for secondary fundraising or for acquisitions and disposal, it's much easier to do that. Now, for example, if you want to make an acquisition on main board, you have compared the incoming assets with your current assets, or if you exceed the 20% threshold, you need to seek shareholders' approval, which I believe is somewhat similar in other international exchanges. Whereas on Catalyst, that threshold is 50%. Similar for fundraising, if you wanted to raise more than 20% of your current share base, you need to seek shareholder approval if you're on the main board, whereas if you're on Catalyst, that threshold is 50%. And this is under your annual share mandate. The IPO review and post-IPO supervision for main board is done by SGX itself, whereas on Catalyst, these are done by a third party known as sponsors. So sponsors are licensed entities, okay, and they are registered with SGX, and they are essentially the outsourced market regulator. And every company on Catalyst needs to have a full sponsor upon listing and needs to maintain a continuing sponsor. So what are the criteria? And I'll explain this. On main board, the basic rule for all companies is that if you have at least a 3-year operating track record and have been profitable in the most recent year, you can list on SGX main board if you have a market cap of at least 150 million Singapore dollars. If you don't have that, but you have revenue, then you can also list if you have at least 300 million Singapore dollars, or if you had pre-tax profit of at least $30 million, then you can list on SGX main board as well. Now, let's say you are a mining company. You can list, if you want to list on main board, you can, as long as you have reserves and a market cap of at least 300 million Singapore dollars. Okay, so this is a special rule that we put in 2015. If we wanted to list on Catalyst, Catalyst has no standard quantitative criteria. But if you wanted to list as a mining company, you could, but you must have at least inferred resources. All right, so this is the main difference between the 2 boards. And also, whether it's for main board or Catalyst, you do need an independent valuation report. The resources or reserves must be reported in accordance to either JORC, NI 43101, or PERC, and valuations prepared in accordance to ValMean. So let's say your company is already listed elsewhere and you want to seek a second listing or secondary listing on SGX. In fact, many companies have done so. Here's a list of some of the prominent secondary listings that we have on SGX. The most famous one is the Jardines group of companies, $35 billion of market cap. The primary listing for Jardine Matheson, Hong Kong Lang, and DFI Retail is on the London Stock Exchange, while the secondary listing is on SGX. But more than 99% of the liquidity is on SGX, simply because their business is here in Asia. So a secondary listing could help companies. It's generally more cost efficient. You access a wider investor base and longer trading hours, and therefore you should get better price discovery. So just a couple of case studies on how SGX works with its listed companies. First up is a SGX listed company called Fortress Minerals. It listed in March 2019. In fact, they just celebrated their 5-year anniversary yesterday. And what we did was we put out a huge spread in the newspaper. So if you go and flip into your Straits Times, you'll see we got a half-page spread talking about Fortress and its journey and its stock price performance. They've done quite well. All in, total returns is, I think, from IPO price till today is up 55%. We helped them with non-rated research. You can see in the upper right-hand side, there's a number of articles. There's a 10 and 10. And then there's a COPC 10 and 10. So it's like 10 questions about the company. COPC is like a coffee discussion with the company C-suite. And what I find interesting about Fortress is that they are expanding to other minerals. They are taking advantage of the fact that they have access to the public markets, and they are looking for copper, nickel, and cobalt in Sabah of eastern Malaysia on the island of Borneo. So that's like an interesting growth trajectory. Southern Alliance Minerals, again, very similar. They are a Malaysian iron ore miner. They listed about 5 years ago. Again, we helped them with non-rated research, and they are also expanding outside of iron ore, looking at rare earth mines. They've discovered an ionic clay deposit in Malaysia, and they're trying to roll that into the company. So in a nutshell, we work with other listed companies. We help with the profiling. We have a very long list of mining videos. We've had mining experts from around the world come to present. We also work with corporate days. So these are like specific organized days for companies to meet with investors. And there it is. I think I finished on time. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be around if you have any questions. Look forward to it. I'll pass the time back to Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I was listening intently, and at the very last moment, I got distracted because I have to admit I was looking a little bit through what's been happening on the markets this morning. And our first presenter up on stage, Andrew Haythorpe, you neglected to mention to me how exciting what you were trying to explain to me before, because when Andrew came up, he said, I said, what would be the headline that would grab everyone to stay in the seats today? And he said, well, let's look at Western Australia. You know, we started with gold, and then we went to iron ore, and we've had all these fantastic minerals to come out of WA, and now it's silica sands. And I think, sell it to me, sell it to me. He's going to sell it to you during the course of this speech, I know. But the headline that I've just pulled up was, this morning's big mover has been Allup Silica, which rocketed on news the silica is sitting on in southern WA is really high quality stuff. Would you please welcome Andrew Haythorpe?
Thank you very much, Chrissy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. So, yes, there is one slide that's suddenly a little bit out of date by a matter of hours. I'll get to that very shortly. And it's actually this one. The share price, as it was a couple of days ago, was 3 cents a share, and our market cap was $2.5 million, which I think someone at least told me this is the smallest company that's presenting at this conference this week, I believe. And with cash in the bank of just under $2 million now since that was done, our enterprise value is, let's say, very affordable. However, as Chrissy just mentioned, we did get some news out this morning ahead of the conference, or the speech that I'm giving you now. And that share price chart now ends with a sort of vertical line that actually shot up to 13 cents this morning on open of trade. So I couldn't really believe it when I got the phone call this morning. But anyway, there it is. So Our market cap's a little bit larger than $2.5 million, and I'm rather proud of that, I guess. It's been 2 years since we listed the company at 20 cents. So as you may have sort of seen other companies present, the last 12 months in particular has been a real challenge for a lot of companies listed in the junior resource space, and we have not been, we've been part of that challenging period. And it'd be very nice to think that we might be nearly through it. In terms of shareholders, half the company is owned by directors and management, so we've got a lot of skin in this game, and that's an understatement. I've been working on this for over 4 years now as my primary focus. So let me get on and tell you the story that we've got to share. Board of directors, 3 directors. We've all got great experience in different capacities, and our focus to this point in time has been very much in West Australia, where we're based, of course, in Perth. And our strategy is very simple. It's a combination of projects, purity, and ports. And by that I mean silica is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. However, to get good quality silica sand is actually quite a challenge geologically. And then to get good quality silica sand that you can feasibly transport bulk tonnage to a port, and for that port to then have capacity or the ability to take 40, 50 or 60,000 tonne vessels, suddenly high quality silica actually becomes a lot rarer as opposed to just plain old silica sand. So 3 of our projects are down in the southern part of West Australia, and more recently we've done some work, and one of the pieces of news is the work we did late last year up near Wyndham in the Kimberleys. And Wyndham Port in particular is a very interesting situation at the moment. So our strategy has been to have multiple projects, which by doing that, we're de-risking the company and de-risking the investment as we move forwards. And of course, as we move forwards, each port has its own specific sort of opportunities. And the silica sand actually in detail, when you look under a microscope and when you start assaying it, the silica sand also has its own little nuances, which are very important from a pricing point of view and customer. So the silica sand that we've been focused on, our main project, or the first one that we started off with about 4 years ago, Sparkler, actually sits almost midway between 2 ports, Albany and Bunbury. So we've been talking to both ports. Southern Ports Corporation operates them, and Bunbury in particular does present us with some opportunities for export capability. So because of that, then we've spent more money or invested in this particular project area. And of course, because of its location, we have the opportunity to truck it either to Bunbury or potentially truck material to Albany in due course. Our maiden mineral resource estimate we came out with a couple of years ago, and we've been doing further work since this, is 70 million tonnes of silica. So one of the interesting things with the silica market is at this stage is most of the customers and a lot of the producers talk around 500,000 to 1 million tonne per annum of production or demand. So 70 million tonnes is more than adequate. You know, you're looking at sort of on the numbers simplistically, a 70-year mine life, but of course in reality, there's the opportunity to kick off the project and then expand it as we move forwards. So let's have a bit closer look. The drilling pattern that you can see where the little white dots are define the resource that I mentioned. So we've been drilling that on multiple campaigns over the last couple of years. And then there's further drilling where we're doing some exploration and so on. A summary of our resource is presented there. And basically, we're looking for silica sand where the raw grades might be around 96, 98% silica, but because of the nature of the silica, it's very easy to separate the iron and the impurities and upgrade it to 99.5%, which is sort of what we focus on. So in terms of the projects, I think from an environmental point of view, we're in great shape with our ESG. That's literally the resource area at Sparkler that we're talking about. It's very low value farmland, and it's low value farmland because basically it's full of silica sand and very little clay and very little nutrients. So from a land use point of view, farming's pretty minimal. It's tough country from a farming point of view, but from a potential mining point of view, it's perfect from our perspective because of its location and the environmental impact that we'll have. In fact, as we remove the silica sand moving forwards and rehabilitate the land, we actually see that the quality of the soil will improve as a result of our activity, and that's a common thing certainly in the mineral sands industry in Australia, which operates for rutile and zircon. So what are we talking about, silica sand? Well, there's some pictures, including a close-up in the bottom right corner, or the middle right corner there, close-up of the silica sand. And you can see what we're looking for under the microscope. We start off raw in the top left corner. You can see some little black dots and bits of material that shouldn't be there. And when we screen it, size it, run a magnet over it, and also just put it through simple spirals with some water, this silica cleans up beautifully. So in this particular case, it cleans up, it actually starts off pretty good at 99+%, and by the time we clean it up, we've got 99.8% silica and around 100 ppm iron, which is what we're aiming for customers. So the other project which we put some news out this morning on, as I mentioned earlier, is up near Wyndham in the far north. One of the things that we don't really think about, certainly when we're talking about geology and projects, but from a customer point of view, Wyndham is significantly closer, of course, to the Asian markets where most of West Australia's commodities find their way to. And Wyndham Port is very underutilised, and it's part of the Northern Australia sort of landscape where there is funding available for worthwhile, worthy projects and infrastructure. So we think there's a great opportunity for Cabbage, where we've been doing our work recently, to supply silica sand through the Wyndham Port, and of course for that port to then have a relatively short shipping distance and an attractive haulage at relatively low costs to the north in the Asian markets. Wyndham itself is actually quite close, or this part of Australia is actually very close to Indonesia. So it's a 90-kilometre road haul to the port from the project area, and we think this has got some real advantages. In terms of the work that we've done recently, those little white dots are traverses where we've done sampling, low impact sampling, and the raw grades that we're getting in certain areas where we see more of a grey colour or white coloured sand, again, is starting to look very, very attractive, even raw up to 99.4%, which we wouldn't normally expect, and 98% in some of these areas, which is a very good starting level. The iron's quite high because we haven't done any gravity separation or magnetic separation, but we'd expect once we do that, those iron numbers will drop and the silica levels will rise. In terms of looking at the sand, you sort of see that the highlight there, the top left is, I call it the ugly, very technical. The ugly is where you can see a lot of iron staining. It's that orangey colour. So we don't have high expectations for that orange patch of sand. However, the other areas where you see the 99.2% silica highlighted in that grey area, for example, and there's other areas of grey coloured sand, it's literally sitting there at surface. We think that there's a real opportunity to produce very high quality, high purity silica that meets the demand of a number of customers which we're talking to. Helicopter access there just for the work that we did last year, but it's only about 4 kilometres from Highway 1, so from a logistics point of view, even though it's a very remote part of Australia, logistically it's actually quite attractive. So that's encouraged us to do this work that we've mentioned today. So it's a very short story and it's very simple, but it's basically we're focused on our opportunities on obviously exporting product into the Asian markets, which stretch, of course, from China around to India. Our multiple project locations, and we're seeing and focusing on the areas where we see high grades and relatively easy low-cost mineral separation, and of course mining at surface, very low cost, of course. There's no drill and blast. This is just free dig sand, pretty much direct shipping ore. So for a small company, it presents some pretty compelling business opportunities for us. We see the silica market in very positive light, especially the high purity silica. Traditionally, silica, glass, that's what it's made of. But of course, moving forwards, the big growth, and I think Bruce will be presenting shortly, and I'll be interested to hear his comments, but I'm sure Bruce is also seeing with his company a lot of interest in high purity silica, and especially for the solar panel industry, because solar panels demand very low iron, around 100 ppm iron, and from a silica point of view, that really does cut a lot of, let's say, general low quality sand out of the equation, and hence our focus on high purity, our projects and ports. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention and thanks for being here today. Sorry, Chrissy.
finished 3 minutes early, so you obviously wanted to get back to talk about that announcement. Right, up next is RareX, which has an impressive global portfolio of exploration assets, including Australia's largest underdeveloped rare earths project, which is located up in the northeast of the state in Western Australia. They've got a strong focus on their proximity to markets. They've got a really strong technical team in-house, and that team is powering towards breaking into new regions. This is James Durrant. He is their Chief Executive Officer, and I know he is very excited to share their story with you today. Please make him welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for your time and consideration today. Thank you for the organisers for putting on this conference, and Chrissy for running the stage for us. RareX is fundamentally a rare earth company, established on the thematic of the global megatrend of electrification. We've got an advancing project, which is technically Australia's largest undeveloped rare earth project in northern WA. We've got an exploration division which is growing globally, and we're doing all that with a very strong internal team that allows us to do it at very low cost and very efficiently. And that team really believe in this thematic, as a lot of us here do. The thematic is that we are in a real fundamental shift. The electrification of things, the global megatrend of green energy generation and green energy use. And that thematic was the basis of this company in 2019 when it was put together by our now chairman, Jeremy Robinson. And it was built on that thematic to get exposure to rare earths, because rare earths are so critical in this transition. And we've now seen that thematic play out in the vast amounts of money that are being invested in the green energy revolution, the vast amounts of government incentives being placed there, the huge amount of ambitious targets for net zero that governments are putting out there. And this is really having an effect on electric vehicles and wind turbines, which are the primary users and consumers of rare earths, where the rare earths sit in the magnets that go into the generators and the electric motors. And so that's really driven a very strong demand for these materials and these metals. And that is now being augmented by the defense sector. We've seen tremendous growth now globally in the West of defense industries. That's driving demand as well, but it's also introducing the strategic supply angle, which is very important in the rare earth space. By way of anecdote, NAIF in Australia will now no longer fund a rare earth project that has any of its product entering into the Chinese value chains. And on the other side, the Chinese labs will no longer support Western companies in developing process flow diagrams. And so there's a real divide occurring here, which means there's a very strategic element that overlays it. But augmented together, the demand is incredibly strong, which you can see from that graph. We're expecting 2 times increase in demand for rare earths by 2035, 3 times increase by 2050. So it's a very, very strong place to be in. But despite all that, the rare earth prices are incredibly low right now. And unfortunately, we are very leveraged to that rare earth price. And so you've seen our share price come down significantly. But the forecasts for the rare earth price are very good. Incentivization pricing is considered to be around about $100 a ton, so nearly 3 times the current pricing of rare earths. Forecasts in 3 years' time are about 3 times the current price of rare earths, and so we're very leveraged as a company to that. We're obviously also leveraged to increasing the definition on our projects, both our advanced development project in Cummins Range and on defining the portfolio of assets that we have. And we are, thirdly, leveraged very much towards our investments. Our investments are in 3 publicly listed companies, all in the critical minerals space, all of which have suffered similar declines in their share price. So we're very much getting set up for a return to pricing, and with it, a return to our share price. I think importantly to note is that the team that we have, which is reasonably large for a small company like ours, and the board have all bought in on market into this business. And so we're very, very vested to make something of it and to really put up the sails, so when the return in sentiment to our sector and to the metals occurs, we are ready to capture that. And we're doing that over 3 pillars, really. The first one is we're advancing Cummins Range. Technically, this is Australia's largest rare earth development that's not yet in production. It has a plethora of near-mine exploration targets, which we think is part of a cluster, so it's got growth potential in scale and in grade, and that is only going to have positive impacts on the net present value of that asset. The rare exploration pillar of the organization is focused on fostering a very good portfolio of exploration assets, particularly in Australia, where we've got quite a selection. But we're also expanding into Canada and into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which I shall go into during this presentation. And to tie that all together, the fact that this is possible is because we've fostered an in-house team, mentored by a very strong board. But I shall start with Cummins Range, which is our most advanced project. It is actually a rare earth and a phosphate project. It is not one or the other, and that makes it a little bit annoying when it comes to the comparisons. We were there for rare earths. We found phosphate in the process. The phosphate is in a very clean apatite mineral, which means it's a very suitable precursor material for the high purity phosphoric acid industry, which itself is a precursor to the lithium iron phosphate battery market, which is a massive growing sector in batteries for mobility and for grid scale batteries. So it really is quite a poetic angle to this particular project. It's underpinned by Australia's largest undeveloped resource, but practically it is Australia's third. If we look at the ton-grade curve at comparable metrics to our peer group, it's Australia's third at 44 million tonnes at 1%, but it also has the phosphate, and it's an absolute key part of this project. And you can see from the diagram on the right, those are the geophysics results that show that this asset sits there in a cluster. And the geologists are very keen to go out there and explore that, because anything that we can grow on that resource base has obviously upside to the project. But you can see from the graph as well, those little green triangles, the market capitalization of the business is very low, and very low relative to where it should be at this level of project definition. And we think from our analysis that is because of validation of the project. It has not yet been validated. And so that really is the fundamental focus for our team on this project. And we validate it three ways, really. The first way is we validate it through offtake, and that is our absolute primary focus at the moment. The Asia Pacific is a very, very good region for monazite offtake. Monazite is the mineral where our rare earth sits. There's monazite processing facilities, obviously in China, but also in India, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Australia itself, existing facilities and growing facilities. So it's a great place to do it. We're also working with government at another way of validating this project to support us in some of the key infrastructure. The key infrastructure for us being our connection to the Tanami Road and some port developments. And we're de-risking the project as well by working along that supply chain and locking away the supply chain with third parties using existing infrastructure, so we have access to a ship. So what we hope to see is the translation then of that validation into the look-through valuation from our net present value into our enterprise valuation. And we're very conscious of how we sit relative to other projects. So these graphs compare us, and these graphs will only get more confident with time as we define this project further. Our projected reserves are among the largest in our peer group for equivalent grades. Our annual output is looking very, very strong. It is looking like it's probably one of the most capitally efficient rare earth projects, largely driven by the fact we have the phosphate to monetize as well as the rare earths in the deposit, and therefore we can keep it relatively small and tight. And importantly for the supply chain of the product, we have one of the lowest radionucleotides in Australia. That means that licensing for product transport, for storage, and for the social and environmental impacts that go along with that, and the license to operate is considerably easier for us. Now, we define this project, and we are defining it further, but it is all anchored around offtake. Offtake is absolutely key. Offtake will drive the completion of the pre-feasibility studies, but we are continuing with the long lead items in parallel. We're doing a lot of work on the environmental baselines to go for approval very shortly. We've got a mining heritage agreement ready. All of our engineering work is ready to be deployed as soon as the offtake has come through. So we're gearing up to advance this project on the back of the key lever, which is offtake. What that means now is that the team have some reserve capacity. We fostered quite a good internal team, but we have some reserve capacity because offtake is a very specific focus and skill set. And we're applying that reserve capacity across the rare exploration side of the business, which is fostering our portfolio and curating a larger portfolio, starting in Australia, moving to Canada and into Saudi Arabia for very specific and very similar reasons. The priority for us, advancing the priority in our exploration portfolio, is this thing called Red Dragon. It's in the East Yilgarn. It's 130 kilometers from Mount Weld. It's in a carbonatite district, and it is a massive geophysical anomaly sitting under the ground there, very close to existing infrastructure. Now, our geologists are incredibly enthusiastic about getting out there to find. This is something we cannot leave sitting in the portfolio without investigating, and so we're going after it with some government backing to do some drilling this year. That's a very exciting thing, and there's indications that not only could it be a large carbonatite, it's in the right districts, but there are indications of IOCG potential. We will have to see on this one, but it's incredibly exciting. Outside of Australia, we're moving into Canada. Now, we looked around the world really for the next place that we can apply our skills that are very synergistic to what we've learned and the project that we're currently advancing. And Canada is actually, specifically the Ontario and Quebec, southern halves of those provinces are very attractive for us, the right kind of jurisdiction, lots of infrastructure, lots of government backing. But also we found a lot of very advanced projects which we think are thoroughly undervalued in that district. So we've been doing a lot of analysis with the team on what we can go for in that region. And during that process, we came upon an area that looks like it's been overlooked. And it is in a niobium carbonatite district at a very interesting intersection of some fault lines. And our analytical team looked at it and said, we cannot not stake this ground. And so very recently, we've gone in and made sure that we have claims over it. There's some very good indications that there are carbonatites. It's niobium focused, similar to the sort of Luni type deposit in the West Arunta. But we are planning now on the exploration program to go out into that region, while still looking for those advanced assets that are significantly undervalued in the current market. And Saudi Arabia, interestingly, comes into this mix as well. It's incredible geology in Saudi Arabia. It's got local markets, which is very important. Domestic markets and local regional markets. It's the same thematic of Australia because it has the Southeast Asian markets, Canada, which has the North American markets. We see Saudi as a real emerging province to suit its local domestic demand, but also the European markets. There's a massive industrial base there, which is the same thematic we have in Australia and in Canada. Incredible infrastructure, very cheap, reliable power, same as in Canada and in not so much in Australia, I might add. And there's a huge move into the critical minerals sector underpinned by Vision 2030, which means there's a massive amount of financial backing. So for us, it's actually a very low risk, low cost way of getting into a very exciting, high potential emerging mining district. And so we're preparing to go in for our first bid in the next month or so. Look, we're able to do this because we have fostered the in-house team. And that has been very important, particularly during this down cycle, is to maintain a team that's very well functioning, it's well integrated, it's well diverse as a team of skills, very applicable to where we are, and to foster them because there's a lot of IP that comes with these types of projects and advancing them. We want to retain that, which means when the wind comes back into the sails, we're ready to launch with it. We're mentored by a very good board. Danny Gorman is the latest appointment to the board. He's a marketing and sales executive and coaching us on the offtake side. He used to be head of global marketing and sales for FMG and other very senior positions in Rio Tinto and Argyle Diamonds. Cameron Henry, he founded Primero and built that up to a 1,500-man engineering company that builds and operates processing plants. So that's obviously incredible skill set to have on the board as by way of mentoring the team. And John Young, he brought Pilbara Minerals from an exploration company into an operating business. And then we're supported by Sean Hardcastle, who's our corporate lawyer, and the founder, Jeremy Robinson, as chairman, who's a very good corporate finance individual, all very invested in this business and backed up by the management team. The management team are very diverse in their skill sets, working incredibly well together. It's one of the reasons we want to foster them. But we've also developed their skills and brought in software into the business and brought in processes into our business. So we've got the skills to do a lot of this stuff internally, not using expensive consultants. That's actually meant we can consult out. So during the time when we have fluctuations in demand on our team, we can consult those services out, and we are doing so at the present moment. But we're not losing sight of RareX because that is the focus. So to summarize where we are at with RareX, Cummins Range is the more advanced project. Offtake is the focus. We have the approvals lined up, both the indigenous approvals and the environmental approvals lined up, ready to go. We've got the PFS ready to finish once the offtake component is sorted, and we've got that real exciting near-mine growth opportunity. Then across rare exploration, the Red Dragon project in the East Yilgarn in Australia is an absolute focus for the exploration team. We're growing our position in Canada and hope to have some very interesting news coming out in the near future. And we're getting ready to bid on our first project in Saudi Arabia, which at the very least will give us a feel for the process, and at the very best will give us access to probably a VMS deposit. Thank you very much. And I really encourage you actually to we're very transparent in what we do, so I really encourage you to follow some of our platforms so you can see and engage with us and give us feedback as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. All right, a reminder, everyone, I'll give you the bell at 2 minutes and I'll stand up at 1 minute. Next up, a deposit which has earned the right to call itself world-class for several reasons. And it comes complete with a deal that has put Impact Minerals, the resources company that has uncovered it and is mobilising it, firmly on the road to production over the next few years. Let's go on a journey to discover the globally unique high-purity alumina deposit at the aptly named Lake Hope in Western Australia. And our expert guide is Dr. Mike Jones. Please make him welcome.
Thanks, Chrissy. Thanks for everyone for being here today. And it's been another great conference. It's the second year that we've been here, and it's great to see we're very well attended again. And so Impact Minerals, we are looking to be a significant player in a little known but crucial metal and mineral that's part of the energy transition, and that is high purity alumina. And we believe that we're on a journey to become a significant player on the global market for this material because of a unique deposit that we have in Western Australia. And so we're on a journey to expand, get into production over the next couple of years. And so I'd like to invite you on that journey today. And that journey starts here at our Lake Hope project in Western Australia. And it's what I like to call the Magic Lake. And it's magical not just for how it looks at certain times of the year, but in the top 2 meters of that lake are a set of clays that contain something in the order of 15 to 20 US billion worth of high purity alumina. It's all a matter of how straightforward it is to dig it up, process it, and then sell it to customers. And we have the right to an 80%. You can look up the details of that deal on our website. Now, it is a world-class deposit in my view. I've been the Managing Director of Impact Minerals for a long time, and I've looked at a lot of deposits, and this stands out because of the economics. Now, this is the results of a scoping study, which is really just an early stage look at the financials around this deposit, and we put this out in November. And there's a couple of things that you need to look at, and the first one is the net present value. That is basically the value of that material in the ground now if someone was to come up and buy it off us. 1.3 billion Australian dollars, or about $1 billion US dollars. That's huge. The second important thing is how much it's going to cost us. And I put this in US dollars. It's about 4,000 US dollars per tonne, and as we'll see, that's probably the lowest cost globally for this material as far as we know. So those are the two key figures. This is for a standard production of about 10,000 tonnes per annum of high purity alumina, and that's what we're aiming to get to over the next 2 to 5 years. So we'll look at those two figures in a little bit more detail. What does that mean? What's the value proposition around this project? So our current share price is about 1.4 cents. We released the scoping study in November, and a lot of people have been talking about the downturn and share prices running down. We're actually up 40 to 50% since November, and that's because I knew when we got into this project it would be a slow burn. As we tick off the milestones, we're going to get the traction in the market that we're looking for, and that is already starting. This is your time. IPT is the code, and you should definitely get us on the watch list now. And that means that our market cap is actually 40 million. So we're in a good position compared to many companies, but what we're trying to drive it to is the value of that project, which is $1 billion US dollars, 1.3 billion Australian dollars. And that means there's a significant growth to go here, 33 times potentially. And of course, many of you were here on the first day and you saw Tony Rivera. They had a 12-bagger since last year, and let's hope that we can produce something similar over the next couple of years as we go forward. So this is why you need to keep your eye on the company. We have significant upside. We've already got the deposit, already got the resource. It's a matter of developing it over the next couple of years. And the real driver to that is actually the low cost, which I mentioned earlier on. This is what we call a cost curve analysis, and basically most production at the moment comes from the Chinese and the Japanese. They make their high purity alumina actually through quite an environmentally unfriendly and energy intensive process out of aluminium metal. And it's been a drive over the last 5 or 6 years by a number of players, mainly on the ASX, but in particular Alpha HPA, which is a very good success story in this space. They're driving down the cost of production to sort of $7,000 to $8,000 per tonne, but we believe that we can beat that significantly at $4,000 per tonne. And that's very important. HPA is a bulk commodity, and when you're in this space, whether it's silica sands or some of the other commodities you're going to hear about today, one of four things has to be true. You've either got to have the biggest deposit, you've got to have the highest grade, or you've got to be first to market, say like a company like Pilbara Minerals, who've done very well in the lithium downturn because they had established client relationships, or you've got to be one of the lowest cost producers. And when I first saw this project, I thought this is going to be one of the world's lowest cost producers, and right now we believe that it could be the cheapest producer by 30 to 50%, which is a world-class margin compared to everybody else. So what is high purity alumina? You're all asking for. It's basically aluminium oxide or sapphire, corundum, for those of you who are into your minerals. And generally there's a benchmark of purity about 99.99%, or 4N for 4 nines. It's listed on the critical mineral list for Australia, Europe and the US, which opens up avenues for us for funding through government and federal and state grants. So what's it used for? So for those of you who've got Samsung phones, you're probably grateful now that the batteries aren't exploding as they were a few years ago and causing a few fires. And if you're a Tesla driver, you're probably even more concerned about HPA because if your battery catches on fire, you're in for a long wait before it can be put out. So it's used as a separator. It stops thermal runaway in batteries, in particular lithium-ion batteries, and we've heard about, of course, the significant growth forecast for lithium batteries going forward. The second and probably larger market is probably a little bit boring in a way, but LEDs. So your lights, all new lights going in the US have to be LEDs, and HPA is used extensively in those lights. Secondly, you're probably all getting your smart screens, your ULEDs, your OLEDs, Samsung, LGs. Huge growth in LEDs in smart screens, and we're seeing buildings globally now being covered in LEDs. And so the demand for that is also going to increase dramatically over the next few years. And there's also some very specialised uses, sapphire glass being one of them, for those of you that got smartwatches and all your smartphones in through there. So we talked about the lithium decade with Joe Lowry yesterday. Perhaps it's going to be the HPA decade as well. And here's the forecast supply and demand curves. And this is in retrospect. And this has been going, it's growing at about 20% per annum. And there's a forecast tightening of supply, sort of around about 26, 27. And that's when we hope to be getting into at least modest scale production in this commodity. So what's it worth? So as I mentioned, the 4N is the standard, that's the benchmark. It's currently trading between $15,000 and $25,000 per tonne. And if you recall, we can produce it at $4,000 a tonne. There are some specialty uses which have extreme margins, but there's not significant volume there. And there's also quite a good market in 3N, not quite as pure. And this is where the volume is, and this will be our target market in the first instance, and then look to try and get into specialist uses for HPA as we go forward. And how much alumina do we have? So in the lake, or the two lakes as we'll see, we've got nearly 1 million tonnes of alumina that we can dig up and convert into high purity alumina. Do the math, 1 million tonnes times $20,000 per tonne, you end up with a figure that's sort of 15 to 20 billion US dollars of material in the top 2 meters of that lake. This is where we are. We're in Western Australia. It is simply the best place to work in mining anywhere in the world, full stop, tier 1 jurisdiction. And the lake is actually in the middle of nowhere. And so our resource lies within these two lakes, West Lake and East Lake. And one of the first natural advantages we can see is that there's a fire break and basically a haul road that runs right up to the edge of the lake. And our material lies in the top 2 meters of these two lakes here. So I will argue that it's the perfect ore body. This is Roland Gotthard. He discovered the ore body through some great lateral thinking. And this is how we drilled out $20 billion US worth of material with a rubber hammer and a plastic push tube and an auger. And it comes out looking like this, plasticine. And this whole drill program, including the assays, cost us 60,000 Australian dollars. So it's the best return on a drill program you're ever going to see. And it's naturally less than 1 micron in size, mostly. It's incredibly small particles. And for those of you who've done physics, that means that there's a very large surface area in this clay material. It means when we drop it into the acid to make this thing leach, it goes straight into solution. So it is very easy to dig up and mine. We believe that we've got 10 to 15 year starter pit in the East Lake alone. We're just going to drive it off the side with a truck, stockpile it, and then truck it off-site. So there'll be no on-site processing. So compared to hard rock miners, there's no crushing, drilling, blasting, grinding, that we don't need any power, we can do it on renewables, we don't need any water on site. So just going to dig up the clay and truck it off site, as we show here. And very importantly, that leaves us with very limited long-term environmental risks. We're going to leave a hole in the lake that's probably about 1 metre deep, and it'll fill up almost as fast as we can dig it. So what that means is that we believe that the approvals for mining and the environment will go through relatively quickly. We've completed our baseline environmental surveys. There was no issues on the lake at all, and very importantly, we have native title clearance with the Naju people. Again, we've done the surveys, no impediments to mining on the lake. Subject to us coming up with a mining agreement, we will be able to go ahead. And again, that will speed up the entire approvals process. Now, I won't dwell on this, but one of the great things about this material is that it does allow you a couple of ways to actually make high purity alumina. And we're working through the process now, deciding which one of those is best. And that's a key part of what we're doing now, which is a pre-feasibility study, which is basically looking in more detail at the scoping study and trying to get a better handle on the finances, where we're going to mine the material, where we're going to truck it, where we're going to build the process plant. But we've got a very new method, a low temperature method. Look for a video that we hope will go viral in a couple of weeks about we're going to make HPA in a slow cooker on our bench top. That's about how easy it is with this material. So pre-feasibility study, there's 4 pillars to this. The metallurgical test work is the key focus. We put out some results already this year. We've got more to come. And we believe that by the middle of the year, we should have plenty of HPA to start handing out to potential customers. We're working through the mining approvals process. We should be lodging our mining lease application. Now we have our environmental surveys back in the next quarter. And we're also looking very closely at where we can build the process plant. Now, this is important because depending on where we build it, we can actually get access to significant government funding to help build, in the first instance, a demonstration plant and then potentially the bigger plant as we move into larger scale production. And then finally, and this is the key area, so in bulk commodities, and we're in this session, we're talking about various bulk commodities, it is about the product marking, it's about offtake as well, and that is a crucial focus for us in the back end of this year as we get material through the test work. Now, I mentioned Alpha HPA. People might think, well, look, can Impact get to $1 billion market cap from the 40 that it currently is? So Alpha HPA was a junior explorer like us 3-4 years ago, had a market cap of about 20 million. They got into the high purity alumina space. They have their own special process. They've knocked the lights out. They're an extremely successful company, and their market cap recently hit $1 billion, and they're just about to expand into a 10,000 tonne per annum production. So we're going to try and follow in their footsteps. We'll do things slightly differently, slightly different markets, but just to show you that in this space, this thing can happen, and that's why IPT should be on your stock watch list. Impact Minerals, we've got 2.8 billion shares on issue. We've got a couple of $1 million in the bank. We've got about $1 million to come from various R&D rebates, etc. But we've been very strongly supported over the years by 2 major German shareholders who own about 23% of the company. One is a family office out of Dusseldorf, and the other is a well-known investor in the resources space. And they've given us plenty of support, and last year they contributed significantly to our last capital raise. So it's good to have their support. So this is where we are on the journey. We had a great year last year, maiden resource, scoping study, started the PFS. This year it's about completing, as I say, the optimization of the test work. We will complete the PFS on schedule by the end of the year. Material off to clients to test, and we'll start to build a pilot plant, which we'll complete next year, and roll straight into a definitive feasibility study. And as I mentioned, we're hoping that the mining lease should be granted basically in a record amount of time, and that will allow us then to get stuck into a demonstration plant. I'll call it a pilot plant there, but a larger 1,000 to 2,000 tonne per annum producer over in 26. And if we recall, that's when the deficit is sort of supposed to be happening, bit of tightening of supply. Hopefully the prices will be increasing even further. And so that's our story. We invite you to come on the story. We aim to be one of, if not the lowest cost producers of HPA globally. We have a unique deposit in a tier 1 jurisdiction at Western Australia. We've got a cost-disruptive metallurgical process, which is now full in PFS. We're building out our capabilities in that met test work, and we'll be building out our end product specification skills. And as I mentioned, we should hopefully be delivering into a high growth business with exceptionally high margins and we're going to be a global supplier. So make sure that you come on that journey with us. So thank you very much.
Great story. Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. Now, like many of you, you would have read recently about the growing demand here in Asia for silica sand, which of course is crucial for glass making because there's lots of large deposits have just been depleted or restricted access to around this region. So one company headquartered in Perth, Western Australia, and perfectly poised to jump in with a ready supply is RareX Silica, which has pivoted to establish silica sand mining and processing operations for export to Asia-Pacific glass making and foundry industries. Now he's looking at me to see how I go today with the next part of my sentence. So let's hear how RareX Resource, coupled with the leadership of Bruce Maluish, the MD of the company, and who has an impressive track record for establishing new projects, successfully fundraising, and he's got a style of, he has this style of management that kind of, it meets corporate needs and it also gives the best return to investors as well. Will you please make Bruce very welcome, everyone?
Thank you, Chrissy, and thank you to Vertical Events for organising this conference once again. RareX Silica, obviously. Silica sand is where we're planning to be, and we've got a lot of it, but the world needs a lot of it. It's one of these products you don't particularly think about, but nearly 50 billion tonnes of sand is used each year. Now, 49.5 billion of that goes into concrete, and therein lies one of the problems. So about 500 million tonnes a year goes into other products, predominantly glass, flat glass, and container glass are the dominant use. But because of the concrete industry, they're using up resources at such a rate that some sand that could be beneficiated to the quality you require to make glass is not being accessed. It's disappearing into concrete. And that's becoming a problem, particularly through Asia, where a lot of the stimulus spending is in infrastructure, which means concrete. But it's the main material that modern cities are made of, and that's for concrete and for glass. So we've got 5 silica sand projects in Western Australia. It's a Tier 1 mining region. We've got more than 100 years of life in each of these projects. They might take a while to set up, but they're going to be there for a long time. We've got mining leases granted over 4 of them. Permitting and infrastructure preparations are underway for each of those. It's low-cost mining. This is material that's at the surface, it's loose sand, and really it's all about rehabilitation, and I'll talk about that. We've got a proprietary method for processing, which is a little bit different to what happens elsewhere, but it gives a better final product. Arrowsmith North is our first project that sits about 270 kilometres north of Perth. Low capex, that's one of the great features of sand. It's basically washing and screening. So about 50 to 70 million bucks and about 6 to 8 months to construct a plant. Very strong interest from Asia for our sand products. We've got a number of glass products as well as foundry sand. And hopefully we get up to into production next year, early next year, and that'll be subject to final environmental approvals. It's not a huge margin, it's not iron ore, but there's about a 20 to 30 Aussie dollars per tonne margin. Share price, it's down a little bit. Many of them have drifted off, and I guess the delays that we've got through the environmental approvals process doesn't help while people are sitting there on shares. We've got a few bucks in the bank, but we're not doing a lot of activity at the moment while we're moving through that EPA environmental approvals process. So board and management hold about 12%, top 20 is about 33%, our largest shareholder, a German outfit that owns 8%. It's a small team, but I think the capabilities we've got within our team are exactly what you need to try and develop an exploration project into production. So I think we've got the right people in place to get these projects up and running. This is where it gets interesting because silica sand is a difficult commodity to research because it is used in so many different products. More recently, you'll hear about solar panels and a lot of the high-tech semiconductors, LCDs. But it's been used in products that we're sort of aware of, but we don't really think about it. I mean, insulation, fiberglass for insulation, obviously flat glass that's used in windows, but engineered stone for building cladding, foundry casting, heads, blocks and manifolds for cars are all cast in sand moulds. Container glass, there's a lot of recycling going on for container glass these days, but there's still a huge demand for raw materials. Swimming pool filtration, water filtration, something you don't see and hear about. Automotive glass. You certainly don't look through your windscreen of your car and think, oh, this is 70% silica, but it is. So it's a product you're surrounded by all the time, but you don't think much about silica. But there is a crisis, and it's mainly because of the concrete production, but also the demand for glass, glass demand's growing about 2 to 5% per year. It's probably slowed up a little bit at the moment, but it is still high growth. And just in Southeast Asia, the market for flat glass and container glass is about 140 million tonnes a year. And it makes a big dent in available supply. If you think sand, forget deserts. Desert sands, they've got an orangey red tinge to it, that's iron. Even for concrete, you need an inert sand, and iron certainly is not inert. Beach sands are predominantly calcium carbonate. So with most of the sand you see, it's not suitable for making glass and or concrete. So it's a product that is generally derived from granite. So it's a finite resource. So yes, it is growing, but give it another 20 billion years, you'll get some more sand. But because of the use, particularly in Asia, it's going to become in demand for other sources. Our market, we're really chasing float glass, container glass, more recently cover glass for solar panels. That's quite a specialist sand and high purity. Sort of need 99.95% and low iron, around 100 ppm. Not a huge market. That number's a little bit out of date now. The demand for that is about 20 million tonnes a year just in China for solar panel glass. There is production in Australia, but this will become a significant sector within Australia. You heard Andrew before. He's got resources down the southwest. There's limited resources in Australia and limited access. However, we do have some very significant large resources. Collectively, we've got about 1.4 billion tonnes, which will last quite a while. But there are a number of producers already in Australia and in northern Queensland, Cape Flattery. They're the single largest exporter of silica sand in the world. And it's been operating for 50 years. It's owned by Mitsubishi. And mainly it's the largest exporter in the world because every other country's banned exports of silica sand. All the Asian countries have banned exports of silica sand because they're worried about their own domestic supply. So there is limited, there's some production from Malaysia that mainly is exported to China. There's a small amount that's mined from Indonesia, but most of the mining you see of silica sand in Asia is all for domestic use. So we have these 5 projects. They're very long life. More important, each of these projects was selected because they've got an adjacent railway line. These are bulk commodities and they've got connections through to ports. As it happens, we've got gas pipelines that run right through the middle of a couple of our projects. So we'll be looking at probably gas-fired power. Arrowsmith North, we've got 200 million tonnes in reserves. We're aiming to put in a plant there for 2 million tonnes a year, so we've got 100 years reserve. Mouchet's got a 200 million tonne resource, but it's also higher grade. So the production from Arrowsmith North, we're looking at flat glass, container glass, but Mouchet is high grade, can be processed up to nearly 4 nines and 100 ppm iron. That'll go into the solar panel market. They're very large resources. They're probably the most advanced non-private silica sand projects in Australia. And when I say advanced, the greatest advancement is in our environmental approvals and our mining proposals. They're all underway at the moment. Environmental approvals in Australia is about a 5-step process. We're at number 5 for Arrowsmith North, so that's getting close. So we expect to get that up and running early next year. We updated a BFS, latest capital estimates, sort of tendered prices for November to February. It gives us an NPV at 10% of 167 million with 25 years of production. We've actually got 100 years of production there. We've got 4 products, 3 are for the foundry industry and 1 for the glassmaking industry. We've got here, we've got VDT trials. I'll explain that. It's a process, it's an environmental consideration, particularly for rehabilitation. And it's quite simple, really. We're taking a sod of topsoil out just in front of where we're going mining and put it back behind us where we have been mining. And it's shown to be easily the best rehabilitation outcome you can get. So we intend to, in fact, the whole mining operation is built around this process for rehabilitation. We've actually built the bucket. It's a modified bucket, goes on the front of a front-end loader. And it's really particularly useful on our first project, Arrowsmith North. This vegetation's all about waist high. Root system's only 200-300 mil, and we'll take a 400 mil sod of material. So we get all the root structures, all the microbes, everything you need there for this vegetation to rehabilitate. That's actually the top of a sand dune. It's difficult to see, but we do knock off the top of a sand dune, but this dune's about 4 kilometres wide and about 12 kilometres long. Environmental approvals in Australia are taking longer and longer every year. They do take a long while, but once you do get them, you've got them pretty well forever. It's fairly difficult to lose your approvals. So we're well down the process for Arrowsmith North. The latest document we lodged was October last year, which was a response to submissions, and they were submissions that were submitted by the public in July, August last year. We've responded to those. The next step is to publish the response to submissions and finalise the assessment with a recommendation to the Minister. So we're right at the pointy end of finally getting those approvals. Mouchet, once again, all the work we've done at Arrowsmith North for approvals, mining and environmental, we've repeated here at Mouchet. So this project is also ready to go as far as the approvals process goes. It's only 50 kilometres north of Perth. It's very high grade, highly sought after sand. We've got inquiries weekly for this particular type of sand, and this we'll set it up for export out of Kwinana. Different vegetation, however, the recalcitrant species here are the low grasses and sedges that you can see, so the VDT will work here. Simple process. The key to this actually is attritioning, which is an agitated slurry which polishes each of the grains. The rest of the process is get rid of the stuff you actually polish off the grains. All the engineering is completed. This plant is ready to start construction. There's no dust involved. It's a wet process. The whole process, there's no toxic chemicals involved in it, and it's quite a simple process. We do take our ESG responsibilities very carefully. We consider them quite carefully, but we also think that the best way to get these sort of targets is at the planning stage. So a lot of work's gone into trying to meet these targets. We'll publish in the Critical Minerals Prospectus, which gets us a lot of attention whenever Austrade are doing roadshows. We have an Industry Attraction Fund grant for $2 million to produce a silica flour. We've been granted a thermal energy permit just near Arrowsmith, and we've farmed that out, and we're doing some trials of VDT on a couple of our projects. So we think this is the place to be, and silica sand will become a significant sector within the Australian mining industry, mainly because of demand out of Asia. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, we've got a booth out there, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Something a little bit different now. Foresta New Zealand Limited utilises sustainable forestry resources to manufacture torrefied black wood pellets and wood-based chemicals as a direct replacement for coal and petrochemicals. It's an interesting concept. Let's see how they've done it, and let's see if it's something you'd like to pop into your portfolio. It's certainly very interesting and innovative. This is their Managing Director, Ray Mountford, and he is going to provide us with more details today. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you. Good morning. Just before I start, we were running a little Kiwiana competition for those that entered. About 40 people put their names in that started to follow us. We drew that and we said we would announce it now. So we have John Slater from Intertech has won about $500 at Kiwiana, some nice wines and power and stuff like that. So well done, John. And to everyone else that missed out, still follow us, please. Okay, so I want to start talking about the carbon cycle first, because I think it's sometimes we forget our basic what we learned in school back in the day. The carbon cycle, obviously is very important. Talk about climate change and all of that, and I think the importance of trees, the importance of plantation trees, the importance of even just growing grass is essential to the health of our ecosystems, our planets, our cities, and everywhere that we live. Because the trees, the plants, they absorb carbon. Now, not all trees absorb carbon at the same rate. Not all plants absorb carbon at the same rate. So there are some that absorb it at 10 times more than others, like a pine tree. And that's why they have that good growth rate, particularly pine trees in New Zealand. New Zealand has developed a resource since the 1930s when we had the Great Depression. The government, the way of creating jobs, started planting pine trees, and planted about 1.7 million hectares of trees down there, and certainly for a long period of time it was the largest man-made forest in the world. Those trees have been planted. They plant them progressively, meaning just like you farm, farm a cattle ranch or anything like that. You might have your cattle in one paddock and then you move them to the next, or one area and you move them to the next, and so on. Trees are done the same way in New Zealand. So they plant those trees over 30 years. You have, so you can divide the forest up into 30ths and so that's how we manage it sustainably. So we harvest 1/30 of the forest per year. We replant 1/30 of the forest per year. In New Zealand at the moment, we're actually replanting at twice the rate that we harvest at. So that's a good thing. What it means is that it's only another 10 to 12 years and we will have doubled the size of the plantation. New Zealand produces 33 million tonne per year in the harvest, and for that harvest, 22 million tonne of that is sold as low-grade logs. There's a further 9 to 10 million tonne that remains in the ground, the stumps, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So what we're doing there is these trees are absorbing carbon out of the atmosphere, and the byproduct of that absorption process, that's actually how the tree grows. That's how the woody mass gets put onto the tree. The byproduct of that is that they turn into, they release oxygen. So this is what gives us this nice, healthy, what we breathe, what we need, that 20% oxygen. The ocean, of course, is the biggest producer of oxygen, but the trees are just as important, and we're seeing that up in the Amazon right now. where we've got record heat and record flood issues happening in Brazil on a scale that you've never seen. So with this uptake of carbon, and why is that's different to petrochem, why is there this issue with having to replace petroleum-based coal, those sort of things, is because, of course, we're digging that out. That's old carbon, fossilized fuels, fossil fuels being dug, it's under the ground. We're releasing more into the atmosphere, and that increases the concentration of carbon. So the sustainability angle on the trees is that they absorb carbon. We then harvest, we get what we need from those, and then when we do that, they release some carbon, but then they get reabsorbed. So every tree that we take in New Zealand is an audited process across the entire forest. Every tree that gets taken gets replanted. And so they harvest, replant the next year. And so you have this continuous sustainable cycle. So unlike a mine where you dig it and then you move on, with this, you dig it and then you replant and you keep doing that. So that's the sustainability angle. Now let's talk about our products. So what we have here is, if I can use the pointer, hard to see. This is the coal drop-in coal replacement that we're manufacturing. What that is it has the same properties as what coal does, including its energy content, and that is, of course, the most important thing. So we've termed a new phrase called an E-log. It's been taken up by the industry in New Zealand, energy log, and as opposed to a 4x2 for building. And what we're doing is we're targeting that 22 million tonne of low-grade logs that are sold as a commodity and exported. And of course, for every tonne of log is exported, we've got a third-party report to work out what sort of carbon footprint they had, 69 kilos per tonne. So it's a lot of carbon going, just sending a log around the world to get processed into something else, and then, unfortunately for New Zealand, they then turn around and buy it back as something else, pay more money for it. So we also make the rosins, we make the terpenes. The rosins is basically, if we're talking about fossil fuels, another fossil is amber. But what rosin is just the live resin that's incumbent in a pine tree. Pine trees are known for their chemicals. There's a $10 billion a year market for pine trees, for pine chemicals, sorry. That's made up of the rosins and the terpenes. I'll talk about it a little bit later on, because with the terpenes here, that's the flavours and the fragrance in the tree. So that's the smell of the pine. It's an essential oil. There's 19 different oils in there. It can be converted into over 5,000 different compounds. If you go to the supermarket, you buy strawberry flavouring, chances are, or pineapple essence, or vanilla essence, unless it says from the vanilla bean, it's probably come from a pine tree. It's probably come from someone I've sold to. So those rosins, they're also used in everyday. So think of sellotape, think of ships, paint, stuff. The background of this industry was actually pine chemicals before. Back in when I started in the industry, it's only 25 years ago, it was known as naval stores. Naval stores was what was used when you used to caulk the ships, when you used to seal the ships up and all of that. Very famous war was fought in the US for independence from England. A lot of people don't know it was all about naval stores. England was a naval power. They wanted to keep the spars and the pine chemicals coming free-flowing back for their navy. So that was part of the political process. So, it's the petroleum industry has pretty much overtaken and provides a lot of these basic chemicals, but the chemical formulation is very, very similar. In fact, in a lot of processes, it's a drop-in replacement. So I better start going through my slides. So we talk about the different uses of these chemicals. This is what I really want to do this morning, is to explain to you this is about our industry, what we're about. And so adhesives, think of sellotape, think of Loctite, think of pine chemicals, rosins and Loctite. Those guys use a heap of it, actually. Think of cleaning products, Pine Clean, Dead Hole, those sort of things. Car tyres, I used to make a compound that sticks the rubber onto the steel belt on the car for Goodyear. It's a big opportunity. Paints and coatings, again, because it's sticky, this stuff. you know, so it's got these things, but also what's important about it is it's acidic, so it means it's reactive. So you can take it and you can turn it into other things. And so it has multiple uses across society. And I think when we think about how do we move away from perhaps that reliance on fossil fuels and releasing carbon into the atmosphere and that sort of thing into a green cycle, this is the way to go. And that's what we've done. We're building as a company, we're unlocking a supply chain. So looking at the forest, and we've got 22 million tonne of logs going offshore, making marginal value for the forest owners. At the end of the day, they get between $10 and $50. Some of the best guys might say they get $90, but that's for a portion of their forest per tonne. Basically, you know, with our product mix and making the 3 products all in one process, you know, we can increase their take-home pay by between a minimum sort of 10%, but well over 25% because we utilise the whole forest. And so building that supply chain opens up that opportunity. So a lot of people, when they do wood pellets, and you talk about wood pellets, they'll say what they are there is they say, oh, we're getting the waste wood. We're not getting the waste wood, we're buying the whole forest. And we use the whole tree. There's more chemicals in the stumps than anywhere else in the tree. It's actually our target place. There is no other customer for the forest for the stumps. So building that supply chain out, lots of tonnage, lots of opportunity in New Zealand. There's plenty of other countries with it as well. I could name Chile, Indonesia, Vietnam. So the products on the fragrance side with the perfumes, so they talk about the essential oil. The essential oil part of it is I think really sexy. And what we've done with that was, how do we get these chemicals out? I actually found that the essential oil's purpose in the pine tree was to move the resin around the tree. So then I took that and I used it to wash out the resins. So we developed a completely organic process. We had no chemicals other than water, which is steam, which we stripped those chemicals out after our process. So that was a key element to setting the base for us to open up the supply chain and add the value to these pine resource. And so what we do is we bring the wood in, the whole tree comes in, and we reduce it in size down to my fingernail size, wash it in its own juice, pull out the resins, distill the resins, and then we desolventize, which means we strip out the essential oils from the wood. And then in that process, that's where we're using steam. It puts heat into it, and that heat, it becomes the drying source for the pelletization process. It provides most of the energy, and the rest of the energy comes when we do the black pellet process, where we actually strip out or cook out the volatile gases. And those volatile gases are is basically the tree sugars, and we capture those and use those to provide the final heat in the process and actually feed some of that heat back to the front cooking process. So by bringing these processes together, we've created a manufacturing process that gives us process efficiencies, about 25. Obviously, we maximise our value. So what are we? We're a manufacturing company that's opening the supply chain and giving better value to the forestry growers. We have 2,000 forestry growers within 100 kilometres of our proposed site. And they're farming just over 600,000 hectares of pine, which is fully one-third of the resource. Really, it's a really exciting opportunity, and I really want to invite people to follow us, to get on board, and to watch what we're going to do in this space. I think the other thing that I'd like to talk about when we're talking about the process and the wood pellets, the drop-in coal replacement. We've actually pre-sold all of our drop-in pellets for the next 12 years for the first production line. It's about $230 million order. On the chemical side, we've got 10-year orders for about 75% of that, and the terpenes as well. So what we've done is we've established a project that can be project fundable, and we are actually listed. We're listed in an Australian entity, so if you can, welcome to look to follow us and invest in us there. But we're putting together project finance, and the process and the project for this first line's got about a 21% return on investment, and requires around 120 million to get it fully up and operational to meet those contract requirements. That's just the size of the industries, and there's a team. So we've got a really good team. All of these guys are absolutely committed and experienced, well over 100 years industry experience in there. So thank you very much. To tell you about kick me off.
Thank you. No, it was interesting. We could have let you go for longer, but we do have a full program of events. The interesting innovators, and we've got another one coming up a little bit later in this morning's program as well. Viking Mines. Hello, where's the short one? Where are you? Can I see you? Julian Woodcock, here he comes. Managing Director. And this is interesting. They're a battery minerals explorer and developer, excuse me. Well, I put my false teeth back in this morning. They are a battery minerals explorer and developer, excuse me. So they're rapidly advancing their flagship Canegrass Vanadium project, which is located in Western Australia's Murchison region. This is their Managing Director, Julian Woodcock, and he's going to share with us a comprehensive overview of the significant advancements that Viking has made and present a compelling investment case for this substantial high-value project containing the critical mineral vanadium. All good to go?
Good to go.
Please make him welcome, everyone.
Thank you for the introduction, Chrissy. Thank you to the conference organisers for having me here. It's been a great conference, and it's great to see good attendance today. I'm here to talk to you about Viking Mines and the investment opportunity. I'll start with mentioning our ASX ticker code, VKA. Write that down, have a look, and look at the history, because I think I'm going to present a compelling opportunity for you to invest. Usual disclaimer and information. Take the time to read that at your leisure. The information is on our website. So I'd just like to begin with our corporate snapshot and overview. As I've mentioned the ticker there, we have around 1 billion shares on issue. Our share price is traded relatively consistent throughout the last 12 months as shown on the chart. Currently trading at a cent. That gives us a market cap of about $10 million. At the end of the last quarter, we had a strong cash balance of over 5 million Australian dollars in the bank, which puts the EV of the project at today's share price at just over $5 million. I'm going to talk to the projects and demonstrate the huge value that we have in there, which really recognises how undervalued the company is, especially when you compare to some of the peer companies working in the same space. Our share registry is quite tightly held. We have about 4 or 5 shareholders that have about 35 to 40%. But in the top 20, around 50%, with 12% held by the directors. So we've got skin in the game. So the 2 projects I'm going to talk to you about are Canegrass and First Hit. Canegrass is the battery minerals project, which is the more advanced of the 2. This is outcropping hard rock vanadium magnetite mineralization. There's more than just vanadium here. We have iron, titanium, copper, nickel, and cobalt as other commodities, which we expect to be able to release value from. We're in a good location, about 6 hours from Perth. We have bitumen road and gas pipeline within 20 kilometres of the project, and it's only 420 kilometres to port to the west. Again, bitumen roads the whole way. The township of Mount Magnet's less than an hour away, and that has serviced airstrip, bitumen strip with regular commercial flights. So good access, good location. First Hit lithium and gold project. This is north of the famous town of Kalgoorlie, located 40 kilometres west of Menzies, which is a couple hours north of Cal. And we have a large land package there of 493 square kilometres. Key thing here is we're about 60 kilometres south and along strike of Delta Lithium's Mount Ida project, which has a resource in excess of 12 million tonnes at 1.2% lithium. And we've completed some early work there, which I'll touch on a later slide, which shows significant potential. So now I'll go and talk in a bit more detail, firstly around Canegrass. Sorry, ahead of that, I just want to talk a bit about vanadium and why vanadium. A lot of my talks progress initially with what do people know about vanadium, and I would say around 9 out of 10 people say not too much. It's an established critical mineral with huge growth potential. At the moment, the baseload supply, around 90% of global production, goes into the steel sector. So all the buildings around us have vanadium within the steel, and that's not going to go away. That's a mandated requirement in many jurisdictions as minimum levels. However, the growing sector is the vanadium redox flow battery. And you can see in the chart here, demand has been increasing steadily. 3 years ago, it was around 1% of the annual production of vanadium went into these batteries. Last year, it was around 10%. And the forecast growth is exceeding over 50% in the coming years. And within the decade, we're going to see a requirement to double the global production of vanadium. So the chart demonstrates that deficit. And we believe cane grass can, in part, serve to fulfill some of that gap. Another critical component is the market supply dynamics. 91% of global vanadium production comes from BRICS jurisdictions. China is the dominant supplier with 61%, Russia next at 17%, followed by South Africa with 8% and Brazil at 5%. There is no production of vanadium out of Australia, and we've heard some talks at the very beginning of this conference from Tribeca and Scott there was talking about jurisdictional diversity, I think were the words that we used. We see a big opportunity with Viking to be able to contribute to that setting. So just have a quick look at the battery. The reason we believe that vanadium redox flow batteries are due to take off, it has a whole number of significant advantages over lithium ion. One of the key things is that it can be recharged and discharged multiple times, having a lifetime more than double that of a lithium battery. And importantly, it stays at 100% recharge capacity over that time frame. It's very easily expandable. You can just increase the tank storage. They're non-flammable, which is a key thing over what we've seen with some of the lithium batteries that have had fire issues. And importantly, it's fully recyclable. At the end of the battery's life, you can take the vanadium, you still have the value of that vanadium, which is around 40% of the battery, and you can put it into another battery or it can be redistributed and recycled. These are being installed. There's over 100 megawatts batteries being installed in China. We're delivering power for over 4 hours to powering over 100,000 homes. So this is commercially proven technology that is penetrating the market. It's just a bit behind what we've seen in lithium. So why this is important is because of cane grass. This is a project we've been working on for about 14 months, and it's been consistently delivering on multiple milestones. We've undertaken resource drilling in the last year. We doubled the contained metal within the resource from 1 billion to over 2 billion pounds. And on subsequent to that, we've completed a pit optimization study, which I'll go through in the next couple of slides. We've also undertaken a series of metallurgical test work, which has also shown that we can extract these valuable commodities. Just for context, at the bottom of the image on the right, there's a list of the metal contained within the resource that we have. There's over $20 billion worth of value in the commodity there. We're not saying all of that is going to be extracted, and that's the purpose of the next levels of study, but certainly a large portion of it is showing that it could be viable. We have thick zones of mineralization over 30 meters thick, which results in low strip ratio projects. So none of this value is really recognized in the low EV that we have in Viking. So the pit optimization study was designed in order to allow us to focus into areas where we want to undertake our next drilling, and that was to make sure we focus on the highest value parts of the resource, and it has been highly successful. We undertook a series of scenarios looking at revenue streams from just the vanadium in our worst case scenario, through vanadium and iron in our base case scenario, through to increased revenue, including the copper, nickel, and the cobalt in our best case. All of those scenarios were successful, delivering a range of outcomes from 30 to 90 million tons. At a conceptual throughput of 1.5 million tons a year, that provides a 20 to 60-year operation. We've settled on the base case with the fold nose pit, which is shown in the bottom of the image on the right, and this delivered 39 million tons. And this is the area that we're going to move forwards with. There's still potential at the other areas, and I'm not discounting those, but we're seeing the highest value opportunity at fold nose. So just to focus in on that area, you can see here an image of the conceptual pit that we produced. The depth there of the pit is about 180 meters from the top to the bottom. The resource is what you can see, the colored blocks within there, and they're colored by the grade of the vanadium. The length of the pit's about 1,300 meters long and 600 meters wide. Importantly, it has a very low strip ratio of 3.7 tons of waste to every ton of ore, and this results in a low mining cost. 39 million tons sit in this pit, containing over 700 million pounds of vanadium. The current vanadium price is at a low at $5 US, but that in itself is $3.5 billion worth of vanadium within this pit. In addition, we'd expect there to be well in excess of 20 million tonnes of iron concentrate. Again, iron concentrate's trading around $100 a tonne. So that in turn provide about $2 billion. So significant large portion of that inherent value I mentioned in the previous slide on the resource is contained within this pit. For these reasons, this is our priority follow-up target. So the resource at the moment is the inferred category under JORC. We need to increase that to indicated, and this will be the focus of our work in the coming year. Around 3,500 meters of drilling we think is going to be required in order to but this is where our focus will be at this time. The project's no good if we can't extract the value, and extracting the value means investigating the metallurgy. Met, who are actually the lanyard sponsor for the conference here, are our metallurgists. They've got a booth here and take the opportunity to catch up with them. They've been undertaking our work over the last year. We started off with doing some simple magnetic separation test work that proved positive, so we commenced on a more detailed test work program. The image on the right is the conceptual flow sheet that we would follow from mining through crushing and grinding and magnetic separation. For the magnetic separation, we provided about 80 kilograms of sample. We were highly successful in producing a magnetic concentrate. We got a 53% mass pull. What that actually means is for every ton of ore that would get fed into a mill, you would produce 530 kilograms of concentrate. And the concentrate we produced attained that high grade that you can see on the second bullet point. 1.43% vanadium, 59% iron, and 11.7% titanium. This high iron value is what makes us believe we'll be able to sell the iron product after we've extracted the vanadium from this. The high titanium at the moment we are treating as a deleterious component, reducing the value of the iron because there's a limited market. However, we're commencing on a subsequent set of test work which will look to separate the titanium, which could convert that to an additional revenue stream, which we haven't considered at this stage. The process after producing the concentrate is to roast it. So the third picture at the bottom there is of the roasted concentrate, which is then leached with water to extract the vanadium. Again, we've had a very successful step with this, extracting over 93% of the vanadium from the concentrate, which gives an overall vanadium recovery of nearly 87%. One thing that's critical is the pit optimization study we completed. This metallurgical test work was underway. We hadn't got all the results when we did it. We put in an assumed overall vanadium recovery of about 74%, and we've attained closer to 86, 87. So that's further upside in the potential economics of that study. Secondary aspects for adding value, I've mentioned the titanium and the iron, is also to extract copper, nickel, and cobalt. That reports to the tail after the magnetic separation, shown on the right of the flow sheet. We need to undertake flotation test work to produce a concentrate. Again, that's earmarked for later this year. So that's an additional value stream which we haven't currently recognized within that pit optimization study. So what are our strategic options with this? Well, firstly, we can look to produce a magnetic concentrate. It's the lower capital cost option, and we could produce a concentrate and we could seek offtake agreements to sell that with the vanadium in it internationally. This is an option we will investigate. However, it will probably most likely yield the lowest revenue, getting a credit for the vanadium, but not the full value. Another opportunity, Australian Vanadium have presented here this week. They are talking about building a facility 400 kilometres to the east of us, and they may be interested in toll treatment or sale purchase of the material. A higher capital cost option, however, is to produce the V2O5 flake, and it's one we can investigate. But the key thing I'm very interested in is strategic partnerships. We've demonstrated our neighbours. Windermere is a mine that was operating 15 years ago. They have most of the process infrastructure in place. And it's on care and maintenance. Our ore looks incredibly more favourable than what they have available to them. So we have the opportunity to utilise this infrastructure if we can develop a strategic partnership with them. This would allow us to fast-track the project forwards. Just showing a quick snapshot of where the other projects are in the area. The key takeaway from here is that we are the westernmost closest to port, and we have a substantial resource. I'd like to draw your attention to Australian Vanadium. They're the more advanced project listed on the ASX. They're currently trading about 12 times the market cap of Viking. So we see that as the opportunity for investors. I think a question was asked at the start of the conference about where's the next 10-bagger. Well, I'd like to think we could be one of those. The reserves is what we need to define through our next level of work, and that's what we'll be doing in our forward plan. Very quickly on the lithium and gold opportunity, I'll go quite rapidly here, I'm running out of time. We have about 493 square kilometres up in the eastern goldfields. Our tenements are in gold and white. The white ones are pending grant. It's a very large landholding. Delta Lithium with their, excuse me, just go to the previous slide. Delta Lithium at the top up here, they have a 12 million tonne resource. We're on a long strike on the same structures. For this reason, we recently undertook a first pass exploration program. Auger drilling was completed. We defined 19 anomalies, a number of them of significant size. This is with soil sampling, so this is follow-up work they'll be looking to undertake in the near future. So wrapping all of this up together rather quickly before Chrissy starts walking too close, is putting this within a schedule of activity and work. We've been advancing the optimization study, as I say at the top. We're working through further metallurgical test work. Key step will be doing the drilling. We're fully funded, I'll reiterate that, for this activity. We can do that drilling later this year. We'll update the resource, update the scoping study on an indicated resource, and that will give us the opportunity to embark on the process moving forward to looking to define reserves on this high-value project. First hit, we'll do some field work, some mapping, some rock chip sampling, and look to expand on the anomalies, and then we'll be able to plan potentially a drill program later in the year. So my last slide to present the investment case down to the wire is that we've got critical mineral exposure to multiple commodities: iron, titanium, copper, nickel, cobalt, vanadium, as well as lithium and gold. Consistently delivered with the project in the last year. We're delivering the pit optimization study, the met test work and the like. We have a large resource that's demonstrating potential viability, and we're seriously undervalued compared to our peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodcock. You have to get that last bit in there, seriously undervalued. Go and have a chat with him. It'll be an interesting conversation. Now, we've had a very serious focus on innovation during the conference, and our final company for session one is a brilliant example of innovating to meet demand. Developed in-house, ChemX's high puree process is capable of producing high purity alumina for lithium-ion battery separators, as well as synthetic sapphire for semiconductors, optical and defence markets. And a key competitive advantage here is that the process is modular, it's scalable, and it is not tied to mine production. How, you may ask? This is Peter Lee, he is their CEO, and he's going to explain why ChemX was granted an Australian patent on this in January of this year, and how their disruptive technology is redefining the nature of HPA. Please make him welcome.
Thank you very much, Chrissy. I just want to take a moment to say what a fantastic conference, and thank you to all the organisers at Tribeca and Chrissy as well. And yeah, pleasure to be here. This is actually our first international conference that we've presented at. The reason for that is we've been very head down on developing our technology, and we have advanced our pilot plant to actually near production. But before I get into that, I just want to touch on the strength of our board. ChemX is really blessed with strength on its board. So Warwick, in the business of creating $500 million companies, many of you may know him. Alvain Vorster, 30 years in Australian raw materials in terms of creating value out of Australian materials, and most recently CEO of Hastings Technology, the RareX company. Stephen Struble, with a broking background, brings that sort of ex-Patterson's flavour and really gives us insight into the markets. Myself, over 20 years operational and technical leadership with Tier 1s, including Rio Tinto, BHP and Roy Hill. I was the manager of the Olympic Dam refinery, including the gold and silver. And so really we've got the right team to deliver value in our projects. 2023 was a fantastic year for ChemX, and we really pushed hard to deliver value and deliver on what we said we would. So in terms of Keynote mid-year strategic funding to keep us moving along, global marketing has already progressed. I was recently at the Interbattery conference a couple of weeks ago. Some very good conversations, well advanced. Fundamentally, ChemX has two projects. HPA, in terms of high purity alumina, is our first project to market, and we can achieve better than 4N. Why that matters is because it's fundamental for battery separator technology, synthetic sapphire, as Chrissy mentioned, LEDs, which are now a household name. So it's everywhere. You just probably don't realise it. To drive capability and optimise quick, we've installed an internal laboratory, and that's the photo there. We've got capability to do parts per billion level assessment, and also parts per million level assessment within minutes. We're not waiting 3 weeks, 4 weeks for internal assays to come back. Our pilot plant is accelerated, and in Q2, we will achieve 4 nines, and in Q3, we'll advance offtake and secure funding. So we're really well advanced in that. Our second project is high purity manganese, and that's really essential for battery chemistries, and I'll get into that later. Essentially, in 2022, we did a scout program. 2023, we did an infill on that, and we drilled over 6,000 metres. We obtained a resource. That resource is very early. Further drilling is expected to at least double the grade and triple the tonnes. And we've also done an internal scoping study with wood. So we're well advancing in parallel. What's also great about ChemX is we have a really tight capital structure, and we've just recently completed a placement, and we've opened that up for more investors to join the ChemX journey. And why that's important is because in Q3, we'll achieve offtake and first cash and revenue. So really, really exciting. The Battery Korea Seoul conference was amazing. So much industry happening in Korea, Japan, and I was able to speak to numerous Korean companies and Japanese companies during that time. And again, those conversations are advancing well. So really, how are we developing it? Well, firstly, we've achieved our 4 nines in our microplan, and we've got our pilot plant under construction. That's about 80%. And we really see that we can deliver 4 nines in this quarter, before end of financial year. We've advanced customer engagement, and in Q3, we seek to secure offtake and development partners. As Chrissy mentioned, we're not tied to mine stock. Our aluminous chemical process takes a chemical and produces 4 nines from that, which means we can actually deploy across the globe to economically favourable jurisdictions where labour's cheaper, energy's cheaper. But having said that, our process is 100% ambient temperature, so it's low energy apart from the final calcination stage. Importantly, we don't want to go and build cars, we're not going to build batteries, but what we do want to do is just take Australian raw materials one step further down the value chain. And indeed, we can do that same process globally. Our manganese, of course, is in the ground, which I'll touch on later, but our high purity alumina is not tied to mine feedstock, which is a key differentiator for ChemX. COVID has taught us many things. One of the most important lessons was around supply chains. And in terms of supply chains, if you have, you can do. If you don't have, you can't. And so this is a quick map of the American gigafactories, and there's no reason why our technology can't be deployed and or licensed within a customer's footprint or adjacent nearby. And so if you've got a hub, you build a larger plant, reduce your OPEX, and you supply many gigafactories from the one facility. Or alternatively, you supply within that footprint. We can operate under contract, or we can license it to any company on the map there. So in terms of the actual technology, its use is probably something we don't realise every day, but it's everywhere. It's LEDs, it's phosphors, it's synthetic sapphire glass. And there's only one thing harder than synthetic sapphire, and it's diamond. But of course, it's prohibitively expensive. Semiconductors for good, responsible usage of power. Consider a watch that you only charge 30 days, not every day, as we currently do. E-mobility, battery separators, there's a real difference between a poor battery separator and a good battery separator. And the difference is high purity alumina. We've all heard battery fires of cars, hoverboards, e-scooters. Good batteries have high purity alumina, and we see that in the future it's likely to be mandated for safety reasons. Why is ChemX a disruptive technology? Again, it's not tied to feedstock, and we've commissioned, we're in the process of commissioning our 24 tonne per annum pilot plant, and really we've just got a patent in January, which is quite exciting. We're expecting other jurisdictions to follow internationally, and those include America, Canada, Japan, US, Korea, both sides of Africa, Europe and Eurasia. So we're really well positioned to take this disruptive technology to the globe. In terms of our actual achievement, we've achieved better than 4 nines, and it's exponentially harder. If you think about the 80-20 rule, it's very hard to achieve 99.99% pure high purity alumina, but we've done it, and we're very close to achieving 5 nines, which is actually 99.999. So when you're starting to get to that levels of purity, you really need to know what you're doing. ChemX has that patent, which practically validates that. We've de-risked the outcomes. So from an original concept, we've taken it through the lab, we've taken it through a microplan, We've taken all those learnings, we've optimised, and we've redesigned that blueprint. And that blueprint we're applying to our pilot plant. And that 24 tonne per annum pilot plant will achieve 4N HPA within Q2 this year. And then next year we'll do a PFS with a suitable customer and we'll launch a commercial plant somewhere in the globe. Ideally, it could be in favourable Asian jurisdictions such as Vietnam, Korea, Japan, or even the US. So we're well on track. Our pilot plant is at 80% and we'll be delivering 4N in this next quarter, Q2. And then obviously customer qualification's already progressed, so that's quite exciting as well. We really want to achieve offtake in Q3. And then of course that commercial plan as we mentioned. So really HPA is well positioned to deliver near-term revenue. Our second project is manganese, and it's high purity manganese sulfate, which is a key ingredient in battery chemistries. Our province is essentially in the Eyre Peninsula, South Australia. Our two tenements, to give you perspective, are 718 square kilometres. The size of Singapore is 735, so it's a massive area. We've got manganese, kaolin, rare earths, but manganese is our interest there. We're not hauling a direct ship ore 500 kilometres to the coast. We're hauling concentrate 160 kilometres to Whyalla, which is blessed with an underutilised port, an industrial workforce, and people don't have to fly in, fly out, they can stay there. Our tenement is on 5th generation freehold farmland, so there's no native title. So things can be progressed at an advanced rate. So why is manganese important to the battery? What we know is that LFP is a cheap chemistry. It doesn't work so well in cold climates, and the energy density is simply not there. Your high nickel, cobalt, manganese chemistries are high performance, but you pay for that, and that's expensive. And so that we see the middle ground as being that lithium manganese iron phosphate. And in terms of, you lose about 20% energy density, but what you can do is you can produce a battery for a third of the price, which means mums and dads have an affordable EV to get around town. So really we see that chemistry is being rapidly developing. The other thing about LMFP too is it's thermally stable, it doesn't catch fire, it doesn't have the same problems as high nickel chemistries. So it's becoming quite popular with many of the automakers and cell makers. That project, we're pragmatically de-risking that. So we've done the exploration, we've achieved that mineral resource. We've got a metallurgical flow sheet that will produce 4 nines, high purity manganese sulfate. And we've done an internal study with Wood on that. Our next step is a PFS and bankable feasibility study, and that'll be done with a likely joint venture partner in the coming years. So just to round out then, why invest in ChemX? ChemX is fundamentally a company on the verge of cash flow. We have a unique trademark, which is high, and that process has developed and achieved a 4 nines flow sheet in a practical sense within a microplant, and now embarking on a pilot plant, which will deliver 4N in Q2. We've achieved a patent, and that patent is for the Australian landscape, which secures our competitive edge, but international jurisdictions are expected to follow within the next 12 months. Our 24 tonne per annum plant would supply qualification samples for eligible customers, and really we're seeking strategic customers for that. And those conversations have been advanced quite recently in terms of the German landscape, Korean, Japanese and US landscape. What's important and what was really fundamental to me at the Seoul Inter Battery Conference was we only need a couple of kilograms to qualify, separate batches. So we're more than adequately positioned to do that. So it'll be a quick timeline. On our manganese resource, we have that resource there. We're expected in the next drill program to double the tonnes and likely triple the grade. And really that maiden resource is only on the top third of that strike. So there's potential upside there that we're very keen to develop. Fundamentally, that Whyalla precinct, it has the hydrogen hub, it has state government investment. It's a very good province to work in. The farmers are terrific and actually want jobs with us when we progress that development. So essentially, key takeaway points. Our high purity alumina process is not tied to mine feedstock. We seek to deploy and license that technology, and we've got patents due all over the world. So thank you very much for your time, and I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so thank you for listening and greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I wasn't actually trying to wrap you up there. Do you still have another couple of points you need to point out to everyone? Are you happy with how you've ended there?
No, that's fine. I think
That's
the key
okay.
points are there. Yeah, thanks very much.
That's right. You just he does have such a beautiful voice, but it's also a very quiet voice. So we've got 3 microphones there, and we've pumped them up to full volume. So I just want to try and get your attention to get you to speak a little bit more loudly. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. And it's a fantastic innovation and great to see another Australian company at the forefront of doing something to meet these demands for our batteries going forwards. Team, for the last time at our FFC conference, please go and enjoy your lunch. I'll ring the bell when it's time to come back in. And we've got some great panel sessions and some more informative sessions for you as well. And there's a lady called Rita who is on after the lunch. She is definitely worthwhile being in the room to listen to. She's an innovator as well and really gung-ho in the gold world. So please make sure you're here for that.